Welcome, dear listeners, to another journey into the shadows where history and the supernatural intertwine. Tonight, we step into the hallowed and haunted grounds of River Raisin National Battlefield Park in Monroe, Michigan. This land, soaked with the blood of one of the most brutal battles of the War of 1812, has long carried whispers of tragedy, echoes of violence, and the restless spirits of those who fell here. From phantom soldiers to ghostly cries, flickering apparitions, and chilling encounters, River Raisin is not merely a historic site, it is a place where the veil between the past and the present remains dangerously thin. So settle in, dim the lights, and prepare for the 25 most chilling hauntings of River Raisin National Battlefield Park. As the sun sinks low over River Raisin National Battlefield Park, the shadows lengthen across the fields, and the air grows heavy with a strange, almost tangible stillness. The park today is a place of remembrance, a historic site honoring the men who fought and died here during the War of 1812. Yet, for all its solemn beauty, it carries an undercurrent of unease among the many ghostly legends tied to these haunted grounds. One in particular continues to draw both fascination and fear: the mysterious sound of phantom drums that echo through the evening air. It often begins subtly, almost imperceptibly, with a soft vibration felt more than heard. A visitor walking the trails might stop suddenly, thinking at first that their own footsteps have created an odd resonance in the earth. But then the sound grows clearer, a low, steady thump, distant yet distinct, like the heartbeat of the battlefield itself. Some describe it as coming from the tree line, others from across the open field where soldiers once clashed. The sound builds in tempo, rising into the unmistakable cadence of war drums. Then, just as suddenly as it begins, the drumming fades, swallowed up by the silence of the night. Those who have heard it often remark on how deliberate it sounds, not random or windborne, but purposeful rhythmic beats, calling men into formation. In the era of the War of 1812, drums were not just instruments but vital tools of communication. They signaled commands, rallied troops, and struck fear into enemies. To hear them now, centuries later, is to be transported back to a time when the ground shook with cannon fire and soldiers braced themselves for the horrors of combat. One visitor recounted how she and her family were walking the battlefield trails near dusk when the drumming began. At first, she assumed it was a reenactment, or perhaps someone playing music nearby. But as she strained to listen, the sound grew louder, rolling across the field like thunder, until even her children fell silent in awe. Yet, when they reached the visitor center to inquire, they learned that no reenactments had been scheduled that day. No one else in the park had been playing instruments, and the staff simply nodded knowingly when she mentioned drums. "You're not the first to hear them," one ranger said quietly. Local paranormal investigators have long been fascinated by this phenomenon. Recordings made during late-night sessions sometimes capture faint, pulsing beats in the background, though skeptics claim they could be explained by distant traffic or machinery. But those who have heard the drums in person insist that there is no mistaking the sound. It carries a weight, a presence, that cannot be explained by mundane causes. It feels alive, as though unseen hands are striking stretched skin in solemn rhythm. Some theorize that the phantom drumming is a kind of residual haunting, an imprint of the past replaying itself like a broken record. The battle at River Raisin was brutal and bloody, with hundreds of soldiers killed in the fighting and many more massacred afterward. The chaos, the fear, and the sheer intensity of those final moments may have left an echo so strong that it lingers still. The drumming, in this view, is not the action of conscious spirits, but rather the memory of war embedded in the land itself, repeating endlessly. Others believe it is something more intelligent, more purposeful. They suggest that the spirits of fallen soldiers still gather when night falls, rallying to the sound of the drums as though preparing for battle once more. Perhaps they march in formation just beyond the veil of the living, unseen but not unheard. To these spirits, the war has never ended. They remain trapped in their final duty, forever answering the drummer's call. Eyewitnesses often describe an eerie atmosphere accompanying the sound. The temperature seems to drop, the air grows heavy, and a sense of being watched settles over the listener. Some have reported goosebumps rising along their arms even before the drumming begins, as though the body senses what the mind has yet to register. Others say that the sound seems to come from all directions at once, making it impossible to pinpoint a source. This disorientation only adds to the fear, leaving the listener with the uncanny impression of being surrounded by an invisible army. Folklore has sprung up around the phantom drums, passed from locals to visitors as cautionary tales. Some claim that those who follow the sound deeper into the woods risk never finding their way back. The drumming, they warn, is a lure, drawing the living toward the realm of the dead. Others suggest that the sound is a form of communication, a warning from the spirits not to forget the atrocities that happened here. To ignore the drums, they say, is to dishonor the memory of those who bled and died on this soil. There are even accounts of people claiming to see hazy figures moving in time with the beats, shadowy shapes marching in formation, or spectral flashes of light resembling torches carried in the night. These rare sightings only deepen the mystery, suggesting that the drums may be more than just sound. They may be part of a larger ghostly reenactment, a full spectral echo of the battle still raging across time. Whether a residual echo or active haunting, the phantom drums of River Raisin remain one of the park's most chilling mysteries. They remind us that history is not just a story preserved in books or displayed in museums. It lives in the ground, in the air, in the silence between footsteps on a lonely trail. For those who pause at dusk, who listen closely when the world grows quiet, the past may not be so distant after all. The steady thump of the war drums, rolling out of the darkness, is more than just a sound. It is a summons, a reminder of sacrifice, and perhaps a warning that the dead still march when night falls over River Raisin. The fields of River Raisin National Battlefield Park are quiet now, a place of remembrance where visitors walk the trails, read the markers, and reflect on the tragic events that unfolded here more than 2 centuries ago. Yet, for all its stillness, the land holds a memory darker than words can capture. On some nights, especially when the air is heavy and the moon shrouded by clouds, chilling screams are said to rip across the field's cries, so piercing they freeze the blood of those who hear them. Locals call them the screams of Frenchtown, and many believe they are the voices of the fallen, echoing from the massacre that followed the battle. The story begins in January of 1813. During the War of 1812, the Battle of Frenchtown was one of the bloodiest engagements fought on American soil. After days of brutal combat, the ground was littered with the dead and the dying. American forces had been overwhelmed, and hundreds of soldiers lay wounded, left behind after the British took prisoners and retreated. What came next would etch this place into history as a site of horror. Allied native forces, acting outside the command of their British leaders, swept through the battlefield and slaughtered many of the wounded where they lay. The air filled with cries for mercy, desperate pleas, and the final screams of men who knew they would never see another dawn. It is said that those screams never truly faded. Instead, they seeped into the soil, into the trees, into the very air of Frenchtown. And now, when night falls and the world grows quiet, they return to remind the living of what happened here. Visitors have described the sounds with unsettling detail. Some hear the cries as faint, carried on the wind like distant echoes of pain. Others report them as deafening, sharp and sudden, as though the battle is unfolding again, just beyond their sight. The screams often come in waves, rising suddenly, peaking in anguish, then fading into silence, only to return again moments later. Those who have experienced them say they are unmistakably human, filled with terror, pain, and despair. One local man tells of walking the grounds late one summer night, long after the park had closed. He had taken a shortcut across the fields, the moonlight casting long shadows on the grass. At first, all was quiet, save for the chirp of crickets. Then he heard it, a low moan, as though someone were in pain. He stopped, scanning the darkness, but saw no one. Then came another, and another, until it sounded as if dozens of voices were crying out at once. Panicked, he ran until the sounds faded behind him. Later, when recounting the story, He swore the voices were real, too vivid to be imagination, too chilling to dismiss. Paranormal investigators have also been drawn to the site, eager to capture evidence of the phenomenon. During late-night recording sessions, some have picked up unexplained sounds, wails, shouts, or cries for help, though skeptics argue these could be the result of animals, shifting winds, or interference. Yet those who have stood in the darkness and heard the screams with their own ears know it is something far beyond the natural world. They describe it as an experience that does not just reach the ears, but burrows deep into the soul, leaving an imprint that lingers long after. The screams of Frenchtown are often linked to the massacre of American prisoners, but some believe they may also come from the chaos of the battle itself. Imagine the terror of men trapped in hand-to-hand combat, muskets cracking, bayonets piercing, and cannon fire shaking the earth, the cries of the wounded and dying, the desperation of those calling for aid, all of it imprinted on this land in a moment of overwhelming violence. Perhaps what is heard now are fragments of that history, repeating over and over, as though the ground itself refuses to forget. There are those who see the phenomenon as more than just a haunting. To them, the screams are a form of warning, a reminder of the price of war and the cruelty of mankind. They believe the dead cry out, not for themselves, but for us, urging the living to remember, to learn, to never let such horrors repeat. In this view, the haunting is less a curse than a lesson, though a lesson delivered in the most unsettling way imaginable. Still, others fear the screams are a sign of restless souls, trapped between worlds, unable to move on. The massacre was sudden, brutal, and unjust, leaving men with no chance for peace or farewell. Their agony, some say, bound them here, tied to the site of their death, until they are acknowledged, remembered, or honored in some deeper way. They will continue to cry out, their voices piercing the night. For those brave or foolish enough to seek out the screams of Frenchtown, the advice is always the same. Do not go alone, and do not linger when the cries begin. Many who have heard them describe an oppressive feeling of dread, as though unseen eyes are watching, as though the living have trespassed into the domain of the dead. Some claim that the screams are accompanied by sudden drops in temperature or flashes of movement in the shadows. A few even say they've felt hands brush against them in the dark, or heard whispers close to their ears, whether residual echoes of a bloody past or the restless cries of tormented spirits. The screams of Frenchtown stand as one of the most chilling mysteries of River Raisin National Battlefield Park. They transform the fields from a place of quiet reflection into a stage for horror, reminding all who hear them that history is never truly silent. Beneath the grass, beneath the monuments and memorials, lies a memory too violent, too tragic, to rest. And so, when the night is dark and the wind carries voices through the air, the fallen of Frenchtown scream once more, their cries tearing across time to haunt the living. The River Raisin National Battlefield is a place where the past is never far away. The Battle of Frenchtown in January 1813 left hundreds dead and countless others wounded, and its aftermath still casts a shadow over the land. Among the many chilling tales that surround the battlefield, none is more unsettling than the stories of the bloody snow. Each winter, when the air turns bitter and the ground is blanketed in white, visitors claim to witness something that defies reason. Patches of snow scattered across the battlefield suddenly darken to a deep crimson, as though soaked with blood. The stains linger briefly before fading away, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. Yet for those who see them, the image is unforgettable, a haunting reminder of the carnage that once painted the ground in red. The origins of this phenomenon lie in the winter of 1813. When American forces clashed with British troops and their native allies, the battle was fierce, fought with muskets, bayonets, and cannon fire, and it raged across the frozen fields of Frenchtown. The snow, pristine at dawn, was soon marred by the violence of war. As men fell, their blood seeped into the ice and snow, staining it in grotesque patterns. Survivors later spoke of the field as a sea of crimson, where the cries of the dying echoed across the frozen air. Worse still was the massacre that followed. When the British withdrew, they left behind wounded American soldiers who could not walk. The next day, native forces descended upon the battlefield, killing many of those who remained. The snow once again ran red with blood, and the frozen ground drank in the horrors of that day. Some say the land itself remembers, and each winter it reveals its memories in the only way it can, through the return of the bloody snow. Eyewitness accounts over the years vary, but they share enough similarities to suggest something unexplainable. Hikers trudging across the battlefield have reported stopping mid-step as they notice the white powder beneath their boots darkening into red. The patches are never large, perhaps the size of a body lying prone, but they appear suddenly, as if soaking up fresh blood. A visitor once described kneeling down to touch the stain, only to find the snow wet and sticky, like melted ice, tinged with something metallic. Within minutes, however, the color faded, leaving behind only ordinary snow, as though nothing had ever been there. Another account comes from a ranger who was closing the park one evening during a particularly brutal winter storm. The wind howled through the trees, and the ground was buried in drifts several feet high. As he made his way across the field, his lantern light revealed strange shapes in the snow, long streaks of red, like trails left by wounded men dragging themselves to safety. He followed the stains until they ended abruptly near the tree line. When he turned back, the marks had vanished, swallowed by the storm. To this day, he insists the snow itself had carried the memory of the dying. Skeptics have tried to explain the phenomenon. Some suggest natural causes, minerals in the soil leaching upward, or a rare form of algae or fungi that blooms red in certain conditions. Yet these explanations fail to account for the fleeting nature of the stains, or for the way they appear only in winter, in patches that mimic the shape of bodies and wounds. Others dismiss the tales as imagination, fueled by the tragic history of the battlefield. But those who have seen the bloody snow with their own eyes argue otherwise. Paranormal enthusiasts believe the snow is a manifestation of residual energy, a kind of recording left behind by the immense suffering that once occurred here, just as voices and apparitions sometimes repeat moments from the past. The snow itself may be echoing the bloodshed of January 1813 each winter. As the ground freezes and conditions mirror those of the battle, the memories awaken. The stains are not real blood but spectral imprints, a ghostly reenactment of the horror. There are even stories of visitors who claim to have felt more than just unease when encountering the bloody snow. Some describe sudden dizziness, weakness in the knees, or a sharp chill that seems to seep into their bones. A few say they heard faint sounds, the distant crack of muskets, the clash of bayonets, or the anguished cries of dying men just as the red patches appeared. For these witnesses, the experience was not just visual, but a plunge into the battlefield's memory, as if time itself briefly folded. Local legends warn that those who linger too long near the bloody snow risk carrying the battlefield's sorrow with them. A young woman once told of seeing a crimson patch while walking her dog. That night, she dreamed of soldiers writhing in agony, their hands reaching for her, their faces pale and bloodied. For weeks afterward, she said she woke to the sound of muffled screams, as though the spirits of Frenchtown had followed her home. The bloody snow is a chilling reminder that the past is never entirely buried. It surfaces when the world grows quiet, when the winter cold mirrors that fateful January, and when the land feels the need to remember. Whether one believes the stains are supernatural or not, the story serves as a haunting testament to the price paid on this ground. For visitors to River Raisin National Battlefield Park, the winter landscape holds a beauty that belies its history. But for those who look closely, the truth sometimes bleeds through. The ground remembers, and the memory is written in red. The bloody snow comes and goes like a fleeting shadow, but its message is clear. The past lingers, and the voices of the fallen will never be fully silenced. The grounds of the River Raisin National Battlefield hold countless stories, whispered through the rustling of leaves and carried on the chill of the wind. Among the many ghostly legends tied to this sacred soil, one figure stands apart from the rest, the soldier in blue. His presence is said to be both mesmerizing and unnerving, a reminder of the war that scarred the land and the lives lost upon it. Eyewitnesses describe him as a tall, gaunt figure clad in a faded blue uniform, the cloth torn and tattered as though it has endured both battle and time itself. His musket rests in his hands, not raised for combat, but gripped with the quiet weariness of a man who has seen too much. His face is pale, his cheeks sunken, and his eyes hollow-eyed. Those who encounter him swear that his gaze follows them, tracking their every step with an intensity that chills them to the bone. He never speaks. He does not cry out. He simply stands or walks slowly across the battlefield, as if caught in an endless patrol. The story of the soldier in blue has become one of the most unsettling tales associated with the River Raisin. Unlike other apparitions that seem fleeting or vague, his figure is described with startling clarity. Some say he appears near dusk, when the sky burns orange and red, like the fields once did with fire and blood. Others report seeing him at dawn, when the first light of day creeps over the riverbanks. His movements are slow and deliberate, his boots crunching softly against the frozen ground, though no sound should be heard. Those who claim to have locked eyes with the soldier often speak of an overwhelming sense of sorrow, as though they were suddenly bearing the weight of his grief. His gaze, hollow and empty, is said to pierce through the bravest of hearts, leaving behind a lingering unease. Some visitors report an inexplicable heaviness in their chest, as if the spirit's despair has seeped into their very bones. A few have even claimed to feel tears well in their eyes for no reason at all, struck by a sorrow that is not their own. The identity of this phantom soldier is a mystery. Historians speculate that he may represent one of the many American militiamen who perished during the Battle of Frenchtown in January 1813. These men, clad in their blue uniforms, fought valiantly against British troops and their native allies, only to be overwhelmed and cut down in the snow. Others believe he could be one of the wounded left behind after the battle, massacred in cold blood during the horrific aftermath. The silence of his spirit, the fact that he does not speak, does not call for help, does not shout orders, may be the eternal echo of a life ended too soon, his voice stolen by death. Park rangers and visitors alike have shared chilling encounters with the soldier in blue. One ranger recalled walking the grounds on a foggy evening, his flashlight beam cutting through the mist. Ahead, he noticed a figure standing motionless near the tree line. Thinking it was a reenactor, or perhaps another staff member, he called out, but the figure gave no reply. As he drew closer, he realized the man's uniform was ragged, his posture oddly rigid. When their eyes met, the ranger felt a wave of grief so intense he nearly dropped to his knees. In a blink, the figure dissolved into the fog, leaving only the echo of silence behind. Another tale tells of a couple visiting the battlefield on a quiet winter afternoon. As they strolled along the paths, they noticed a man in blue walking parallel to them in the distance. At first, they thought he was part of a historical program, but as they watched, he seemed to glide rather than step, his movements oddly out of sync with the natural world. When they paused, he paused. When they quickened their pace, so did he. Finally, the woman turned to wave, but the soldier vanished before her eyes, leaving her trembling and clutching her partner's arm. Skeptics argue that the stories are the product of imagination, fueled by the battlefield's grim history and the suggestive power of its reputation. The mind, they say, can conjure ghosts when primed with tales of bloodshed and sorrow. But those who have seen the soldier in blue insist otherwise. They describe details too precise to dismiss the frayed edges of his coat, the way his musket gleams faintly in the fading light, the hollow emptiness of his eyes that feels all too real. For paranormal enthusiasts, the soldier in blue is more than a ghost. He is a symbol. He represents the countless young men who marched into war and never returned home, their lives cut short on a frozen battlefield. His silence may be his eternal testimony, a wordless reminder of sacrifice and loss. Each time he appears, it is as if the battlefield itself is breathing life into its memory, ensuring that the world never forgets the price that was paid upon its soil. There are those who believe the soldier in blue is not lost at all but waiting for comrades who never arrived, waiting for orders that were never given, or waiting simply for peace that never came. His patrol across the grounds may be his attempt to fulfill a duty left unfinished, a soldier forever bound to his post. The legend of the soldier in blue has grown over the years, passed from one visitor to another, each story adding to his mystique. Whether he is a lost spirit trapped in time, a projection of the battlefield's sorrow, or a figment of human imagination, his presence lingers in the minds of all who hear of him. On quiet nights, when the wind whispers across the frozen earth and the air feels heavy with memory, some say you can still catch a glimpse of him. A lone figure in a tattered blue uniform, musket in hand, his gaze fixed upon you, as though seeing not just who you are, but all who came before, silent, steadfast, and sorrowful. The soldier in blue remains a haunting guardian of River Raisin, a reminder that the past never truly fades. The woods surrounding the River Raisin National Battlefield carry with them a silence that feels almost alive, as though the trees themselves are listening, watching, and remembering. Visitors who walk the trails often remark on the stillness. The way the air seems heavier here than in other places, as though the land holds tight to the memory of what unfolded long ago. Yet, among the most chilling accounts tied to these haunted grounds is the tale of the native warrior. As shadow, a figure said to move swiftly and silently among the trees, seen only for a fleeting moment before dissolving into darkness. Those who have encountered this shadowy form describe it as tall and imposing, more than just a trick of the light. The silhouette resembles a warrior, broad-shouldered and strong, its outline sometimes marked by what appears to be the faint suggestion of a feathered headdress or the curve of a bow in hand. It moves with an eerie speed, darting between tree trunks, its steps making no sound. Hikers say it never lingers long enough to be fully seen, yet it is impossible to mistake its presence. The feeling it leaves behind is unmistakably intense, unnerving awareness that someone or something is watching. The origins of the native warrior's shadow are traced back to the War of 1812 and the Battle of Frenchtown, when British forces allied with native warriors clashed against American troops. The fighting was fierce, brutal, and devastating. Countless lives were lost in the snow-covered fields and forests, and many of the fallen were never given a proper burial. For some, the belief is simple. Spirits that die violently and without peace linger, bound to the places of their death. The shadow that roams the battlefield's edge may be the restless soul of a warrior who fell in battle, condemned to remain in the woods where his final breath was taken. Hikers and visitors tell of the strange sensations that come before a sighting of the shadow. The air grows unnaturally cold, even on warm summer days. The sound of birdsong and rustling leaves falls away, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. Then, just at the edge of vision, the shadow appears, swift, dark, and purposeful. By the time the witness turns fully to look, the figure has already vanished, slipping deeper into the trees. Yet the sense of being followed lingers long after, leaving hearts racing and footsteps quickened. One of the most unsettling encounters was shared by a man who walked the trails at dusk. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the snow, he noticed movement among the trees. At first, he thought it was another hiker, but as he looked closer, the figure seemed unnaturally tall, its outline sharper than any human form should be. He described it as pure darkness, like a man-shaped void where light could not enter. The figure moved with incredible speed, weaving between the trees, and though it was ahead of him, he felt a piercing gaze settle on him. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. When he blinked, the figure was gone, yet he could not shake the feeling that it had simply melted into the darkness, still nearby, still watching. Another chilling tale comes from a pair of hikers who reported seeing the shadow not just once, but multiple times during their walk. They first noticed it in the distance, a fleeting figure moving along the tree line. Minutes later, it appeared again, closer this time, as though circling them. Each time it vanished, the forest grew quieter, until even their own footsteps seemed muffled by the weight of the silence. By the time they reached the edge of the trail, they felt certain that the figure had followed them the entire way, keeping just out of reach. Theories about the native warrior's shadow abound. Some believe it is the spirit of a fallen warrior, locked in a perpetual hunt, his restless soul forever guarding the land where he once fought. Others suggest it is not one spirit, but many, their collective energy merging into a single dark form. There are also those who argue that the shadow is less of a ghost and more of an imprint of memory carved into the very fabric of the land, replaying endlessly like a scar that never fades. Skeptics, of course, dismiss the sightings as tricks of the light, the human mind projecting fears onto the shifting darkness of the forest. They argue that the brain is wired to recognize shapes, especially human-like ones, in patterns of shadow and movement. Yet those who have seen the figure insist that this is no ordinary illusion. The shadow moves with intention, with purpose, and with a speed that defies explanation. It is not just a shape in the dark, it is something alive, something aware. For many who walk the grounds, the presence of the native warrior's shadow serves as a reminder of the battlefield's painful history. It embodies the countless lives lost during the conflict, the warriors who fought and died far from peace. In its swift, silent movements, people see both the strength and the tragedy of those who perished. Some even feel that the shadow is not malevolent, but protective, watching over the land and the spirits tied to it, ensuring that the stories of the fallen are not forgotten. The battlefield, after all, is more than just a historic site. It is a place steeped in memory, where the past seeps into the present. The native warrior's shadow is a manifestation of that memory, a lingering presence that reminds visitors of the sacrifices made upon this soil. Whether spirit, imprint, or something beyond human understanding, it continues to haunt those who dare to walk the wooded paths at dusk. Even today, hikers who leave the trails at night often glance over their shoulders, certain that something is moving just beyond sight. And in the quiet of the forest, when the wind dies down and the shadows stretch long, the legend of the native warrior lives on, swift, silent, and eternal, across the quiet expanse of the River Raisin National Battlefield. Night often brings a stillness that feels almost unnatural. The trees stand like solemn witnesses, and the winds carry whispers of a past too violent to be forgotten. Yet, among all the ghostly tales tied to this historic ground, none are more unsettling than the stories of the dying fires. Witnesses describe them as glowing embers scattered across the fields, as if long extinguished campfires have inexplicably sparked back to life. They appear in the darkness, soft at first, like distant flickers of orange and red, and then pulse with a quiet intensity. But when anyone dares to approach, the lights vanish instantly, leaving nothing behind but the frigid embrace of the night air. The origins of these phantom flames are tied to the bitter cold of January 1813, when soldiers camped along the River Raisin during the infamous Battle of Frenchtown. Exhausted, wounded, and freezing, they huddled together around campfires for warmth, their lives balanced on the edge of hope and despair. Many never survived the night. For some, the fires were their last comfort before death claimed them. For others, the embers went cold before dawn, leaving them exposed to the unforgiving winter. The belief that these spectral fires are the lingering traces of that desperate time has haunted the battlefield ever since. Visitors often describe their encounters in strikingly similar detail. The night begins as ordinary, the fields dark and still beneath the moon. Then, without warning, faint glows appear in the distance. At first, they resemble fireflies, but the light is steadier, richer, too large to be mistaken for anything so small. As the watcher draws closer, the glows take shapeless circles of reddish-orange light, hovering close to the ground, like the dying embers of a once-thriving fire. The sight is so vivid that many have sworn they could almost feel the warmth. But just as quickly as they appear, they vanish. One blink, one step too close, and the fields return to black, as if the lights were never there at all. Some visitors report hearing faint sounds accompanying the flames. A low crackle, as if wood were burning, the distant murmur of voices, too soft to understand, drifting on the wind. Others describe the faintest smell of smoke lingering in the air, a scent that dissipates the moment the fires vanish. The sensory details are so convincing that many first-time witnesses are certain they stumbled upon real fires, only to be left with nothing but the chill of disappointment and unease. Local lore ties the phenomenon to the final hours of the American soldiers who perished during the massacre that followed the battle. After the fighting ended, the wounded were left behind in makeshift shelters or near their own campfires. The British-led native warriors who returned later set some of those shelters ablaze, and many of the wounded were consumed by fire. It is said the battlefield remembers this horror, replaying it in fragments across the centuries. The phantom embers may be all that remain of those doomed campfires, flickering eternally in the places where men suffered their last agonizing moments. One chilling account came from a park ranger who was closing the grounds one winter night. He noticed what he thought were unauthorized fires burning in the distance and rushed to investigate. The lights appeared, bright and clear, glowing steadily in clusters across the snow. Yet when he arrived, there was nothing, no fire, no footprints, no sign of human presence. The air was colder than he expected, the silence suffocating. Though he dismissed it publicly as a trick of the eyes, he later admitted that the experience unsettled him more than anything else he had ever encountered on the battlefield. Another story comes from a group of paranormal investigators who set out to document the lights. Equipped with cameras and thermal imaging devices, they spread across the fields after dark. Several reported seeing the fires, some even recording faint glows on their equipment. But when they moved toward the lights, their instruments registered nothing, no heat, no flame, no physical trace at all. What remained were inexplicable orbs of light that resisted every attempt at scientific explanation. Theories about the dying fires range from the spiritual to the psychological. Some believe the fires are residual hauntings, energy impressions burned into the land by the trauma of war. Others claim they are intelligent spirits, soldiers returning night after night to the only comfort they knew in their final hours. Skeptics argue they are optical illusions, reflections of distant lights, or even natural phenomena like swamp gas. But believers point out that the lights are too consistent in their appearance and too deeply tied to the battlefield's history to be dismissed so easily. For those who have witnessed them, the dying fires are more than just a curiosity. They are an intimate glimpse into the past. They serve as spectral reminders of the suffering endured on these fields. The way men clung to their campfires for warmth, light, and hope amid unbearable conditions. Each flicker of phantom flame is like a whisper from the past, echoing through time to remind the living of the lives lost here. The battlefield itself seems to encourage such manifestations. Its soil is steeped in blood, its history scarred by violence and loss. For centuries, the land has absorbed the weight of grief, and perhaps it cannot help but replay fragments of what it has seen. The fires may never truly die out, because in some sense, the memories of those nights never did. Even now, visitors walking the grounds after dark often glance across the fields, searching for that telltale glow. Some see nothing, others claim to catch the faintest flicker, like a match struck in the distance. And a rare few see the embers in their full, phantom glory, scattered across the fields like the souls of the fallen. But always, the fires vanish before they can be touched, leaving behind only the cold night air and the certainty that something ancient and sorrowful still lingers. The River Raisin National Battlefield carries with it the weight of untold suffering, the ground still scarred by the echoes of one of the bloodiest chapters of the War of 1812. By day, the landscape seems peaceful, a stretch of green fields and trees where visitors come to learn, reflect, or simply walk. But by night, the atmosphere shifts, as if the veil of time thins and the past pushes through. Among the many chilling accounts tied to the battlefield, one of the most haunting is known as the Prisoner's March. Witnesses have described seeing and hearing a spectral procession of wounded men shuffling across the grounds, their agonized moans carried on the wind. Paranormal investigators claim to have recorded the metallic clink of chains and the dragging rhythm of footsteps, sounds that have no earthly source. The story of the Prisoner's March finds its roots in January 1813, during and after the Battle of Frenchtown. The clash between American and British forces joined by native allies, was brutal, leaving hundreds of American soldiers dead or gravely wounded. Those who survived the initial onslaught were rounded up as prisoners of war. The journey was merciless. Many fell along the way, unable to go on, only to be struck down where they lay. Their groans of suffering and the clattering of chains would have etched themselves into the memory of the land. A memory that seems to replay itself centuries later for those who dare to listen. Accounts of the ghostly march often begin with sound. Visitors describe hearing faint noises when the park is still low groans, almost too soft to notice at first, that swell into unmistakable cries of agony. Then comes the dragging, rhythmic scuff of boots or bare feet across hardened earth, sometimes accompanied by the heavy rattle of chains. The sounds seem to approach in waves, rising and falling as though a procession is making its way across the fields. By the time the listener realizes the uncanny source of the noise, the air has turned cold, heavy, and oppressive. Those who remain rooted in place claim the sounds pass them by, as if a line of invisible men is moving directly through the grounds, their march continuing endlessly, long after their deaths. Some have claimed to see the figures themselves. On misty nights, witnesses describe shadowy forms, bent and limping, trudging forward in uneven lines. Their outlines are indistinct, yet their suffering is unmistakable. Some appear to clutch their sides or drag their legs, while others lean on phantom comrades for support. Their faces are pale and hollow, eyes staring vacantly, as though locked in a trance of eternal torment. A few who have seen these apparitions say they seemed oblivious to the living, moving past them as if still bound by the orders and chains that controlled them in life. One chilling report came from a local resident who was walking her dog near the battlefield late one evening. She claimed her dog froze in place, growling at nothing she could see. Moments later, she heard the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps dragging across the field. Then came the faint metallic clinking, like shackles being pulled with each step. She felt the wave of dread as the sounds grew louder, surrounding her, though the field itself was empty. Her dog whimpered and strained to leave, and she did not linger to see more. She later admitted she had the sense that something large, unseen, and unbearably sad was passing directly by her. Paranormal investigators have returned to the site numerous times, drawn by the consistency of the reports. Some have managed to capture recordings of what they describe as residual sounds, the faint groans of men, the metallic scrape of chains, and the steady beat of footsteps echoing through the night. These audio clips are often muddled, but they are distinct enough to convince even skeptics that something beyond the ordinary lingers on the battlefield. Others claim to have recorded unusual electromagnetic spikes or felt cold gusts sweep past them while standing in still air, as though the passage of spectral bodies was moving unseen through the night. Historians and paranormal researchers alike believe the prisoner's march is tied not only to the battle itself, but also to the terrible fate that awaited many of the captured soldiers. Accounts from the time detail how some prisoners were forced to march north, their wounds untreated, only to collapse and perish along the way. Others never made it out of Frenchtown at all, killed in the massacre that followed. The trauma of that suffering, the endless march of men who knew they were walking toward their deaths, may have imprinted itself so deeply upon the land that it continues to echo centuries later. Skeptics, of course, dismiss the phenomenon as imagination, suggestion, or the natural sounds of the environment amplified by expectation. The battlefield is quiet at night, they argue, and the mind can easily turn the rustle of branches or the creak of the earth into something ghostly. Yet even skeptics struggle to explain the eerie recordings collected by investigators, or the similarity of the stories told by people who had no knowledge of one another's experiences. The prisoner's march endures as one of the most unsettling legends of River Raisin, not only because of the sights and sounds reported, but because of what it represents. It is not a tale of isolated hauntings or random ghostly figures. It is the collective suffering of an entire group. Men bound together by chains and agony, who never found release in life. Their march was one of despair, their journey without hope, and it seems the weight of that despair still clings to the land. For those who walk the battlefield at night, there is always the possibility of hearing the slow rhythm of feet dragging through the earth, the rattle of unseen chains, the mournful cries of men long dead. To witness the prisoner's march is to glimpse not just a ghostly vision, but the shadow of history itself, replaying across the fields where so much blood and sorrow once stained the ground. It is a reminder that the past does not always rest quietly, and that some journeys, once begun, may never truly end. The River Raisin National Battlefield is a place where the echoes of war still linger in the soil and air, where every gust of wind seems to carry with it a memory of violence, suffering, and loss. Though it has become a quiet, historic site where visitors come to learn about the War of 1812, many who step onto its grounds describe experiences that cannot be explained by history alone. One of the most unsettling of these is not a sound or a vision, but a smell and odor so pungent and disturbing that it has driven people away in terror. It is the smell of burning, a sudden burst of acrid smoke and scorched flesh that appears from nowhere, clinging to the air before vanishing without a trace. The accounts of this smell are eerily consistent. Visitors often describe strolling peacefully across the battlefield when they are suddenly hit with an overpowering stench, one that is unmistakably connected to fire and death. It begins with the bitter temps of smoke, like dry wood catching flame, then deepens into something far more revolting, the sickening odor of burning flesh. The smell is so strong that some have gagged or doubled over, convinced for a moment that a fire must be raging nearby. Yet when they look around, the fields are calm, the trees untouched, and the air otherwise clear. Within moments, the scent dissipates, leaving behind only dread and nausea. To understand the origins of this phantom smell, one must return to January 1813, when the Battle of Frenchtown erupted on this very ground. The fighting was fierce and bloody, with both sides suffering heavy losses. But the true horror came after the battle had ended. Wounded American soldiers, left behind in makeshift shelters and private homes, became victims of one of the war's most infamous atrocities. The air that day would have been thick with the smoke of burning structures, the cries of the wounded, and the unimaginable stench of men consumed by fire. It is this memory, some believe, that the land still exhales centuries later. Reports of the burning smell have come from all corners of the battlefield. One visitor recalled standing near a row of memorial markers when the odor suddenly hit her. It was faint at first, like someone burning brushwood in the distance, but within seconds, it intensified, wrapping around her in a suffocating wave of smoke and charred flesh. Her eyes watered, her stomach twisted, and she stumbled away from the spot. When she looked back, the field was calm, empty, and perfectly ordinary, yet she swore she could still feel the scent clinging to her clothes. Others have described the experience as more fleeting, a sharp burst of smoke carried on the wind. Paranormal investigators, equipped with cameras and recorders, have documented the phenomenon as well. While they could not capture the smell itself, they noted that it often accompanied spikes in their instruments, as though the environment itself shifted when the odor appeared. One investigator claimed that moments after smelling the acrid smoke, he recorded faint cries in the background of his audio equipment, cries that grew louder when replayed, like voices calling from a fire. What makes this haunting particularly disturbing is its physical effect. Unlike ghostly apparitions, which can be dismissed as tricks of the eye or distant sounds mistaken for echoes, the burning smell attacks the senses in a visceral, undeniable way. Some have described gagging or coughing violently, as though the smoke were real and filling their lungs. A few have even left the battlefield abruptly, unable to endure the sensation, their bodies reacting as if the horror of that day were being replayed not only before them but inside them. Skeptics suggest explanations rooted in the natural environment. The battlefield is surrounded by woods and wetlands, where decaying vegetation can sometimes release strong odors. Farmers burning brush nearby might also account for sudden whiffs of smoke, but those who have experienced it insist that this smell is different. It is sharper, heavier, and far more grotesque, tinged with something undeniably human. It carries with it not just the suggestion of fire, but the memory of suffering. The persistence of the burning smell across decades of reports suggests that the land itself may be imprinted with the trauma of that January day. Psychologists who study hauntings refer to this as a residual haunting, where powerful emotions and catastrophic events leave behind an echo that replays again and again. In this case, the smell of smoke and scorched flesh may be the battlefield's way of remembering. It's grim testimony to the horrors once endured here. Local lore deepens the unease. Some say the smell is strongest during the winter months, especially around the anniversary of the battle in January. A few even claim that, when snow falls on the battlefield, the cold air traps the scent, making it linger longer before disappearing. Others believe the burning smell is not just residual but a sign of unrest, that the souls of those who perished in the flames are still crying out, their suffering renewed each time someone catches the stench of their deaths. For those who walk the battlefield today, the burning smell is a reminder that history does not always stay buried. The War of 1812 may be centuries past, its battles studied in classrooms and commemorated with monuments, but the land itself seems unwilling to forget. When the acrid stench rises suddenly in the still air, it is as though the battlefield exhales its grief, forcing the living to confront the horrors it once held. The burning smell of River Raisin is more than just a ghost story. It is a sensory haunting, one that reaches directly into the body and mind of those who encounter it. Visitors who experience it are left shaken, not because they saw a phantom or heard a mysterious voice, but because, for a fleeting moment, they felt as if they had been transported into the heart of the battle itself. They smelled what those men smelled, gagged as those men must have gagged, and for an instant shared in the terror and agony of that day. It is a haunting not of sights or sounds, but of the very air. A reminder that some horrors are too powerful to fade, and that the battlefield still remembers the fire. The River Raisin National Battlefield carries with it the weight of tragedy, its fields and riverbanks steeped in the memories of violence, loss, and despair. Though the site now serves as a quiet reminder of history, locals speak of encounters that transcend time, moments where the grief of the past seeps into the present. Among the most enduring tales is that of the widow's lament, a sorrowful figure said to wander the grounds in eternal mourning for her loved ones lost during the massacre that followed the Battle of Frenchtown in 1813. The story begins with a woman whose life was torn apart in a single, devastating stroke. She was the wife of a farmer living near Frenchtown, raising her family in a small homestead not far from where the battle would rage. Her husband and 2 sons, both barely men but old enough to fight, answered the call to defend their home. When war reached their doorstep, they joined the ranks of American soldiers and militiamen who sought to repel the British and their allies. What followed is remembered as one of the bloodiest conflicts of the War of 1812. The initial American victory was short-lived, for reinforcements never came. Within days, British and native forces launched a devastating counterattack. The fighting was brutal, but the true horror unfolded after the battle itself. Wounded American soldiers, left behind with promises of safety, were mercilessly slaughtered or left to die in flames when buildings were set alight. The woman's husband and sons were among those who never returned. The grief that consumed her was said to be unbearable. Neighbors told of how she would walk the battlefield day after day, weeping openly, calling their names into the empty air. She wandered along the riverbank, stood among the scorched homes, and lingered in the fields where bodies had lain. Her cries were described as unlike any sound people had ever heard. Part wail, part whisper, filled with sorrow, so raw it left listeners shaken to their core. Over time, her mourning became the stuff of whispers, a haunting presence tied to the land itself. When she finally passed away, some said she would never truly leave, for her grief had become part of the battlefield's soul. Centuries later, visitors still speak of the widow's lament. On certain nights, especially near the anniversary of the battle in January, a figure has been seen drifting across the fields. Described as a tall, slender woman in a long dress, her form is often shrouded in mist, her face pale and indistinct. Witnesses claim she moves with a slow, deliberate step, as though searching, her head bowed as if weighed down by sorrow. Some report hearing soft sobs carried on the wind, faint at first, then rising into a wail that pierces the silence before fading back into nothing. One park ranger recounted a chilling experience during an evening patrol. The air was calm and the grounds empty, yet he suddenly heard what he thought was a woman crying. The sound was so sorrowful, so filled with despair, that he felt compelled to follow it. He traced the noise toward the river, where a thin mist curled along the water's edge. There, just beyond the reeds, he saw her, a figure dressed in gray, her shoulders hunched, her face turned downward. He froze, certain he was seeing a person, but when he called out, the figure dissolved into the mist, the cries fading with her. Visitors who know nothing of the legend have reported similar encounters. Couples walking the trails have spoken of hearing faint weeping, only to find themselves alone. Photographs taken at dusk sometimes reveal curious shapes, like the outline of a woman's form, barely visible against the backdrop of the fields. Paranormal investigators who have explored the site claim to have captured disembodied cries on their recorders, whispers of sorrow that seem to rise from the earth itself. Skeptics suggest natural explanations. Perhaps the wind through the trees creates sounds that resemble crying, or mist along the river forms shapes easily mistaken for figures. Yet those who have experienced a widow's lament insist that what they saw and heard carried an undeniable weight of grief, something far deeper than coincidence or imagination. What makes the story so haunting is not just the apparition itself, but the human tragedy it represents. The widow is not a nameless specter of war, but a mother and wife whose entire world was shattered. Her grief was so profound that it seemed to anchor her spirit to the battlefield. Unlike soldiers who might wander in search of duty unfulfilled, her presence is bound to love and loss, a lament that refuses to fade. Some say that when the widow's lament is heard, it is not just a ghostly encounter, but a reminder. Her sorrow calls out across the centuries, urging those who walk the battlefield to remember the lives torn apart by violence. It is a voice of grief that humanizes the war, pulling it out of textbooks and monuments, and placing it directly into the hearts of those who listen. There are even those who believe her lament serves as a warning. Visitors have spoken of being overcome by sudden feelings of dread when the sobbing begins, as though the widow is cautioning them against repeating the mistakes of the past. Others believe she searches endlessly for her husband and sons, unable to accept that they were lost, her soul forever bound to the battlefield in its most tragic hour. Whether one views the widow's lament as the lingering spirit of a grieving woman or as the echo of trauma too deep to ever fade, the effect remains the same. To walk the grounds of River Raisin is to risk hearing her sorrow seep through the silence, a sound so mournful it chills the blood and tightens the chest. Her presence ensures that the massacre is never reduced to mere numbers or lines in a history book. It is remembered through her grief, eternal and unyielding. In the stillness of the battlefield, when the air grows heavy and a faint wail drifts across the fields, those who hear it know they are not alone. The widow remains, her sorrow woven into the very fabric of the land. Her lament, an eternal cry for the family she lost and the tragedy that still haunts River Raisin. The fields of River Raisin National Battlefield hold countless stories of bravery, bloodshed, and sorrow. Centuries later, the echoes of that fateful January day in 1813 still resonate through the air. And among the most eerie and enduring tales is that of the horse without a rider. It is a phenomenon reported by countless visitors. The unmistakable sound of hooves striking the frozen earth, a rhythmic pounding that suggests a galloping horse. Yet when eyes search the landscape, no rider or even horses in sight. Witnesses describe the sound in chilling detail. The thundering hooves often begin softly, almost like a distant drumbeat, gradually growing louder, as if the horse is approaching from beyond the horizon. The pace is erratic at times, mimicking the panic and urgency of battle. It seems to weave across the open fields, moving from one edge of the battlefield to another, stopping suddenly, then resuming as though its mission is endless. Those who have experienced it describe a shiver running down their spine, a sense of something ancient and restless tied to the very soil. Many believe that the phantom horse is a spectral remnant of the cavalry that fought during the battle. On that bitter January day, American forces, alongside militia and local volunteers, faced a brutal assault by British troops and their allies. Horses were a crucial component of the conflict, used to deliver messages, charge enemy lines, and carry the wounded to safety. In the chaos of battle, countless mounts perished alongside their riders. One story holds that a particular cavalryman, a young officer known for his skill and bravery, was struck down during the fighting. His horse, loyal and terrified, ran wild across the battlefield in the confusion before being lost in the snow. Since then, it is said, the spirit of the horse continues to search for its fallen rider, unable to rest. Encounters with the horse without a rider are not limited to one area. Visitors near the riverbank often report hearing the hoofbeats echo across the water, the sound strangely amplified as if carried by some unseen force. Hikers on the wooded trails claim to feel vibrations beneath their feet, a subtle rhythm that grows into the unmistakable cadence of galloping hooves. Even during winter, when the snow is thick and the air is still, the phantom horse seems able to traverse the fields effortlessly, leaving no trace of its passage. One account comes from a group of students visiting the battlefield on a quiet afternoon. As they explored the open fields, a series of rapid, thunderous hoofbeats suddenly erupted behind them. They turned, expecting to see a mounted reenactor or a trail rider, but the fields were empty. The sound moved closer, circling them, then suddenly faded, leaving an unsettling silence that made their hair stand on end. Later, they discovered that the exact spot where they had felt the vibrations was near where cavalrymen had fallen during the battle, lending credence to the idea that the hooves were more than a trick of imagination. Some witnesses have reported other details alongside the hoofbeats. A faint mist seems to accompany the sound at times, curling along the ground, as if outlining the phantom horse in the darkness. Others describe a feeling of presence, a cold weight pressing against their shoulders, or a sudden gust of wind that sweeps past their face. A few have even claimed glimpses of a dark, powerful form galloping across the horizon, its outline fleeting and indistinct, vanishing as soon as they attempt to focus. Paranormal investigators have been drawn to this legend for decades. Some have used motion sensors and ground vibration detectors, hoping to capture evidence of the phantom horse. While none have produced visual proof, instruments occasionally detect unexplained tremors or rhythmic pulses consistent with hooves striking the earth. Audio recordings sometimes capture low thuds or muffled beats, echoing the reports of visitors. Although skeptics dismiss these as natural phenomena, the wind, wildlife, or distant machinery, the consistency and emotional impact on those who hear it cannot be ignored. The phenomenon is most often reported during the winter months, around the anniversary of the battle, or in the early morning hours when the battlefield is shrouded in fog. Some suggest the cold air helps carry sound across the open fields, enhancing the spectral effect. Others believe that the horse is a residual echo, replaying the trauma of the battle in an eternal loop. Whatever the explanation, those who hear the phantom hooves report an overwhelming sense of the past pressing into the present. The haunting is made all the more poignant by the story of loyalty and loss. Horses were more than mere instruments of war. They were companions to the soldiers, forming bonds that could endure even the chaos of battle. The image of a mount, continuing to search for its rider, even after centuries, strikes at the human heart. It is a reminder of the lives lost and the connections severed by violence, a spectral testament to the loyalty and devotion that transcend death. For those walking the battlefield today, the horse without a rider is both terrifying and strangely mournful. The sound of hooves crashing through the fields can send a thrill of fear down the spine, yet there is also an undeniable sense of tragedy. Visitors report pausing, listening intently, hoping for a glimpse of the spectral horse and the rider it seeks. Some whisper prayers or speak words of comfort into the empty air, as though acknowledging the grief of a creature trapped between worlds. Ultimately, the horse without a rider is a haunting that embodies the unresolved pain of the River Raisin battlefield. It is a reminder that history is not always silent, that the past can echo in unexpected ways, and that some bonds, whether between soldiers and their comrades or between humans and animals, cannot be broken, even by death. The phantom hooves that pound across the fields are more than a sound. They are a voice, a cry of loyalty, and a testament to the enduring power of memory. Anyone visiting River Raisin should tread carefully across the open fields, particularly near the sites of cavalry skirmishes. When the air grows cold and still, when the fog rolls across the battlefield, and the silence is pierced by the unmistakable rhythm of hooves, it may be the horse, without a rider, still searching, still galloping forever, bound to the fallen soldier it lost so long ago. Along the River Raisin, amid the rolling fields and quiet woodlands of the battlefield, there exists a place unlike any other, a small, unassuming spot where the air seems to resist the warmth of summer, chilling all who step into it. Known among locals and paranormal enthusiasts as the cold spot by the river, this area has been the focus of countless unsettling experiences. No matter how hot the day, the air within the circle of trees and brush around the riverbank feels unnaturally frigid, carrying with it a palpable sense of unease. Visitors first notice it as a sudden drop in temperature. One moment, the sunlight glimmers on the river's surface, and the air is warm, carrying the scent of grass and wildflowers. The next, they find themselves shivering, goosebumps rising across their skin, as if an invisible hand has plunged them into icy water. Thermometers brought into the area often register several degrees lower than the surrounding environment, yet there is no apparent source for the chill. Electronics sometimes malfunction nearby, cameras shut off unexpectedly, and recording devices pick up strange static or low hums. The sensation is accompanied by a pressure in the chest, an instinctive warning that something unseen is nearby. The origin of the cold spot is widely speculated. Some say it is the lingering anguish of the soldiers who fell along the river's edge during the Battle of Frenchtown in January 1813. Many American troops were captured and left wounded, ultimately slaughtered by British-aligned forces. Their final moments, filled with fear, pain, and despair, are thought to have left an indelible mark on the land. Those who linger near the river report the weight of that sorrow pressing down on them, the cold air serving as a physical manifestation of grief that refuses to dissipate, even after centuries. Witnesses describe the experience in similar, haunting terms. A local historian visiting the battlefield to document its stories reported walking along the riverbank when she suddenly felt the temperature drop sharply, her breath fogged in the air, despite the July heat. She described a heavy sense of dread, as if invisible eyes were watching her every move. Though the rest of the field remained bathed in sunlight and warmth, the circle around her remained icy, as if insulated from the rest of the world. She later claimed to have seen a faint, shadowy figure at the edge of the cold area, standing motionless before vanishing entirely when she blinked. Other visitors have shared eerily similar encounters. A group of teenagers exploring the park for a history project reported that while walking along the river trail, they stumbled into the cold spot. One of them, who had been laughing just moments before, suddenly fell silent, rubbing his arms to stave off the chill. They all felt an oppressive presence, like the air itself was heavy with sorrow. Even after stepping back into the warmth of the surrounding fields, the memory of the cold lingered, along with the sense that something unseen was watching, waiting, and remembering the violence that once occurred there. Paranormal investigators who have visited the cold spot describe unusual phenomena. Temperature readings drop without explanation, EMF meters spike, and audio equipment frequently picks up low-frequency hums or indistinct whispers. Some have speculated that the area acts as a conduit for residual energy, a lingering imprint of the trauma and death that took place on the battlefield. Others believe it could be the location of a spiritual convergence, where the boundary between the living and the dead is unusually thin. Regardless of the explanation, those who experience the cold spot agree on one thing. It is a place that commands respect, a location where the past refuses to rest. The psychological impact is significant. Witnesses often report a sudden, overwhelming feeling of dread, not just physical cold. The mind reacts as if danger is imminent, even when the environment presents no threat. Some feel a compulsion to leave immediately, while others describe an almost magnetic pull, a sensation that draws them deeper into the chilling air. The combination of fear, cold, and unseen presence creates a hauntingly immersive experience, one that lingers long after the battlefield is left behind. There are also accounts of auditory phenomena accompanying the chill. Visitors have reported faint groans, distant cries, and whispers seemingly carried on the wind. The sounds are often low and indistinct, as if echoing from beneath the river or from beyond the veil of time itself. Some interpret these as the voices of the wounded soldiers, reliving the terror of their final moments, trapped forever along the riverbank where they suffered. The whispers are subtle, but they carry an emotional weight, a resonance of pain that seems almost alive. The cold spot has become a point of fascination for both historians and thrill seekers. For some, it is a solemn reminder of the human cost of war, a tangible connection to the past that provokes reflection and empathy. For others, it is an irresistible mystery, a place where the natural and supernatural intersect in ways that challenge understanding. Those who dare to linger often report an intensified perception of the battlefield, as if the ground itself is speaking through temperature, pressure, and sound, relaying its story through an invisible, chilling language. Despite its reputation, the cold spot is not overtly malevolent. There are no attacks, no aggressive entities. Rather, it is a space suffused with sorrow, a silent witness to history. The chill serves as both a physical and emotional reminder of the tragedy that occurred along the River Raisin, a marker of lives lost and grief unspoken. Many visitors leave the area humbled, their perspective of the battlefield forever altered, carrying with them the memory of the cold and the weight of the past. To stand in the cold spot by the river is to confront history in its most intimate, visceral form. It is a place where warmth and comfort are replaced by icy air and unease, where sorrow clings to the body as much as to the spirit. The cold is more than a temperature. It is a sensation, a message, and a memory, a chilling bridge between centuries. Those who experience it find themselves connected, if only briefly, to the men, women, and soldiers whose lives were forever changed along the riverbank. The River Raisin battlefield is a quiet place today, but the cold spot ensures that the past is never truly gone. When the air grows frigid unexpectedly, when the hairs on the back of the neck rise, and when the subtle weight of despair presses against the chest, it is the lingering presence of those who fell here, remembered not just in history books, but in the chill that refuses to be ignored. The cold spot by the river is a silent sentinel, a chilling reminder that some echoes of the past can never be warmed away. Near the visitor center at River Raisin National Battlefield Park, an eerie phenomenon has captured the attention of both locals and paranormal enthusiasts. The disembodied voices known as the General S orders. Visitors frequently report hearing sharp, authoritative commands echoing across the wind, as if a military officer is still directing troops across the frozen fields centuries after the battle. The voices are often in English, but occasionally a crisp French accent pierces the air, reflecting the bilingual nature of the forces involved in the conflict. The phenomenon is most commonly reported during quiet hours, when the park is nearly empty and the sound of modern life has faded. Walkers and hikers have described the startling clarity of the commands: left flank, advance, or hold the line. They report hearing, shouted with an intensity that suggests urgency and imminent danger. Despite searching the area, witnesses can see no reenactors, no park staff, no fellow visitors close enough to produce such strong vocalizations. The voices seem to emerge from the very air, carried on the wind in a way that is almost tangible, commanding attention as though the battlefield itself is still alive with the clamor of soldiers. Some theorists suggest that the phenomenon is a residual haunting, an imprint of the battle's chaos preserved in the land. The Battle of Frenchtown, in January 1813, was brutal and fast-moving. with American forces clashing against British and native allies in a struggle that resulted in hundreds of casualties. The cacophony of gunfire, shouting, and confusion may have left a psychic imprint, repeating in certain conditions when the atmosphere aligns. The general's orders, then, could be the echo of a commanding officer giving orders to troops, his voice forever locked in time, cutting across the battlefield even as centuries pass. Eyewitnesses often describe an overwhelming sense of presence when the voices appear. Some feel a cold draft that snakes around their shoulders, while others experience goosebumps along their arms and necks. The tone of the orders is firm, unyielding, and resolute, carrying with it the weight of urgency and responsibility. Many report a momentary compulsion to respond, as though the mind is momentarily drawn into the battle itself, imagining the commands being directed at an army that exists no longer. A few have even mentioned hearing additional battlefield sounds layered with the voices. The distant crack of muskets, the shuffle of feet through snow, and the faint clinking of metal armor. One particularly chilling account comes from a park volunteer who had stayed late to catalog historical documents. As he walked back toward the visitor center, he was stopped mid-step by the sound of a voice shouting, "Form up, hold your position." The command seemed to circle him, coming from multiple directions at once, as if issuing instructions to a formation he could not see. He froze, feeling a weight pressing against his chest, a combination of fear and awe. When he finally moved forward, the area was empty, and no other sounds accompanied the echoes of that commanding voice. The voices are not always aggressive. Some visitors report a sense of order or discipline in the tones, almost as if a general is meticulously directing movements to maintain strategy and minimize chaos. The commands sometimes alternate between English and French, reflecting the composition of the forces at the battle. Guard, formez, la ligne, or advance, left flank. Some have recounted their ears capturing the interplay of languages, as though the past is replaying its layered reality. This blending of language adds to the authenticity of the phenomenon, providing a chillingly accurate representation of what might have been heard on the battlefield over 2 centuries ago. Paranormal investigators have visited the site numerous times, attempting to capture recordings or confirm the source of the sounds, while no one has been able to record clear audio of the voices consistently. Some have captured faint, low-frequency echoes that suggest a vocal pattern. Environmental explanations, wind, echoes off the terrain, wildlife have been considered, yet the clarity, tone, and commanding nature of the orders defy conventional reasoning. Skeptics remain unconvinced, but the consistency of eyewitness accounts over decades lends a weight to the stories that cannot be ignored. The general's orders are more than an auditory curiosity. They evoke the tragedy and tension of the Battle of Frenchtown. They remind those who hear them of the stakes of that brutal conflict, of the lives lost, and of the strategy and sacrifice that played out on those frozen fields. Many who have experienced the voices report leaving the site with a heightened awareness of history, the past made present in a way that textbooks cannot convey. The orders seem to follow a pattern, often appearing during periods of stillness and low activity. Fog, cold air, or certain wind patterns appear to trigger the phenomenon. Though no definitive environmental explanation exists, some locals have adapted, noting that the voices tend to emerge near specific spots around the visitor center or along the edge of the riverbank, areas that may coincide with where commanding officers directed troops during the battle. The site becomes a stage where history and the supernatural intertwine, creating a deeply immersive experience for those attuned to it. For visitors, hearing the general's orders is simultaneously terrifying and awe-inspiring. The experience evokes both the fear of battle and the respect due to those who fought and fell. The air seems charged with purpose, as though the spirits of the battlefield are enforcing discipline even in death. It is an encounter that lingers in memory, the sharp tones of commands echoing long after the visitor has left the field, an auditory reminder of sacrifice and the enduring presence of history. Standing near the visitor center, when the wind is right and the world grows quiet, the sharp, commanding tones of the general's orders may emerge from nowhere. They serve as a chilling reminder that the River Raisin battlefield is not just a landscape frozen in time, but a place alive with the echoes of the past. Those who hear them often step back, startled, yet deeply aware that the voices are more than mere sound. They are history speaking, a spectral command calling across the centuries, carrying the urgency, tension, and human drama of a battle that refuses to be forgotten. Along the winding trails of River Raisin National Battlefield Park, a strange and unsettling phenomenon has long been whispered about by locals and nighttime visitors alike. The flickering lantern. On quiet nights, when the moon casts a pale glow over the snow-covered fields and the wind carries the faint scent of winter air, a solitary light has been seen moving among the trees and along the paths. The light is soft, yet persistent, flickering as though carried by a trembling hand. Witnesses describe it as the glow of an old, oiled lantern, its flame dancing eerily in the darkness, guiding or perhaps searching for something unseen. Those who have encountered the lantern often describe a mixture of curiosity and fear. It does not behave like a normal lantern carried by a person. It moves with purpose, floating or gliding rather than being carried naturally. At times, it seems to hover just above the ground, bobbing gently along the snow-dusted trail. Other times, it weaves between trees with unnerving speed, disappearing and reappearing as if following a predetermined route. Several hikers and late-night visitors have reported following the lantern, hoping to discover its source, only to have it vanish suddenly, leaving them in silence and darkness, hearts racing and breath clouding in the cold air. Many believe the flickering lantern is the spirit of a battlefield surgeon, doomed to wander the grounds eternally. During the Battle of Frenchtown in January 1813, countless wounded soldiers lay unattended in the snow, suffering in agony through the frigid night. Surgeons worked tirelessly, often with minimal light, carrying lanterns as they moved from one fallen soldier to the next. It is thought that one of these healers, unable to save all those in need, became trapped between worlds, compelled to continue seeking out the injured long after his own death. The lantern, they say, is both his guide and his marker, a spectral tool of his unfulfilled duty. Eyewitnesses often report an intense feeling of urgency when they encounter the lantern. A family walking along the trail late one evening described the experience vividly. The flickering light appeared in the distance, bobbing just ahead of them. As they approached, the temperature dropped sharply, and the crunch of snow underfoot seemed amplified, each step echoing in the still night. The lantern moved deliberately, pausing briefly near a cluster of trees as though inspecting the area, before resuming its slow, methodical journey. No figure was ever seen holding it, and when the family drew closer to where it had paused, the lantern was gone, leaving them staring into the empty, shadowed trail. Others report hearing accompanying sounds. Some speak of faint footsteps crunching in the snow, the soft rustle of fabric, or distant murmurs that fade as quickly as they arrive. The auditory phenomena are subtle, yet they add an unsettling depth to the encounter, reinforcing the impression that the lantern is more than an ordinary light. It is a presence, deliberate and watchful, moving through history as if the battlefield itself is replaying moments frozen in time. Paranormal investigators who have visited the trails of River Raisin have attempted to capture the lantern on camera or record its movement. Some report that photographs reveal a dim, glowing orb where none existed, while video sometimes shows a faint, wavering light that defies explanation. EMF meters occasionally spike, and thermal imaging can detect cold pockets around the path of the lantern, aligning with the accounts of temperature drops noted by witnesses. These anomalies support the idea that the lantern is not merely a trick of the eye or imagination, but a lingering echo of the battle's tragic events. The flickering light often appears near areas where the heaviest casualties occurred, reinforcing the theory that it is drawn to the wounded and the dying. Some witnesses have described the lantern pausing over depressions in the snow or near tree lines where soldiers are known to have fallen. In one chilling account, a visitor noted that the lantern hovered near a shallow ditch, and for a brief moment the faint outlines of fallen figures could be seen in the shadows around its shapes that vanished when looked at directly, leaving only the soft glow of the lantern in the dark. Psychologically, the lantern has a profound effect on those who see it. Witnesses report a mix of fear, fascination, and a strange compulsion to follow it, as if an invisible force is guiding them along the trail. Yet, despite the impulse to pursue it, many also experience an acute sense of danger, a warning that the lantern is not of this world, and that it belongs to a past soaked in blood and sorrow. This duality, curiosity, mixed with dread, adds to the legend, ensuring that the flickering lantern continues to captivate and terrify those who wander the battlefield at night. Some theorists suggest that the lantern may also represent the lingering conscience of the battlefield, a symbol of those who could not be saved and those who tried desperately to help them. In this interpretation, the light is not malevolent, but mournful, a reminder of human fragility and the weight of duty. For the wandering surgeon, the lantern becomes a tool to continue his work, a spectral extension of his desire to save lives that were lost in the cold January night. The phenomenon of the flickering lantern is rarely predictable. It has been seen in clear skies and foggy nights, along open fields and dense tree lines. Its appearance is fleeting, yet unforgettable, and those who witness it often speak of the experience for years afterward. Some return to the battlefield in hopes of encountering it again, drawn not only by fear, but by the need to connect with the past in a tangible, eerie way. To encounter the flickering lantern at River Raisin National Battlefield Park is to step into a moment where history and the supernatural intersect. The cold air, the soft flicker of light, and the oppressive weight of memory create an experience that is both chilling and awe-inspiring. It is the lantern of a surgeon who never left, a light that moves among the echoes of battle, guiding the lost, seeking the wounded, and keeping alive the memory of those who fell on the frozen fields. Those who witness it often leave the trails with hearts pounding, their minds racing, but with a deep, silent respect for the tragedy etched into the land. The flickering lantern is more than a ghost story, is a testament to the enduring presence of history, a spectral reminder that some spirits never rest, and that the battlefield's past continues to walk alongside the living in the darkness of night. In the shadowed woods surrounding the River Raisin National Battlefield Park, there is a phenomenon that has puzzled both locals and paranormal enthusiasts for decades. The fallen scouts. Visitors traversing the trails, particularly near the denser sections of forest, have reported fleeting glimpses of figures dressed in buckskin and frontier gear. These apparitions often appear crouched among the underbrush, their eyes seemingly scanning the area with military precision, or moving swiftly along the trails as though on urgent patrol. They are not malevolent, yet the suddenness of their appearance and their almost unnatural agility can strike a chill into even the most seasoned hiker. Eyewitnesses describe the scouts as youthful men, their clothing weathered and practical, fitting the style of frontierer soldiers or scouts who would have moved ahead of the main troops during the battle. The figures are frequently seen carrying small rifles or tomahawks, their postures tense and alert. At times, they are spotted crouching low to the ground, as though hiding from an approaching threat, while at other times they are caught sprinting across clearings or darting between trees, moving with speed that seems beyond human capability. One visitor described the sight of 3 scouts emerging from a thicket, glancing in his direction with piercing eyes before disappearing as if swallowed by the woods themselves. Many theorists believe that the fallen scouts are residual hauntings, echoing the movements of the young frontiersmen and scouts who perished during the battle or while on reconnaissance missions. During the conflict, scouts were essential for gathering information, setting ambushes, and navigating the harsh winter landscape. Their lives were often cut short, and the chaos of battle left their spirits unmoored. The apparitions might represent these soldiers, endlessly replaying their duties, forever bound to the paths they once patrolled. Encounters with the fallen scouts are almost always brief but intense. Visitors report an overwhelming sense of being watched, followed, or assessed by unseen eyes. Some hikers have attempted to follow the figures, driven by curiosity, only to have them vanish mysteriously. A couple recounts that while trying to keep pace with a scout darting through the trees, The figure seemed to accelerate unnaturally, slipping between trunks and underbrush before fading into thin air. The sudden disappearance often leaves witnesses with a mix of awe and fear. A tangible reminder that the line between past and present can blur on the battlefield. Several accounts suggest the scouts are connected to specific locations where scouts historically performed their duties. Small clearings, hidden paths, and elevated ridges within the woods are commonly reported as points where the apparitions are seen. At these locations, some visitors also describe hearing faint sounds that accompany the sightings. The rustle of fabric through leaves, the faint snap of twigs underfoot, and occasionally the distant murmurs of orders or hurried conversation. These auditory cues, combined with the visual phenomenon, create an immersive encounter, as if stepping into a moment frozen in time. Paranormal investigators have attempted to document the fallen scouts using cameras, night vision, and thermal imaging. Some report capturing fleeting heat signatures or blurred figures that appear to move independently of the terrain. The scout apparitions rarely linger long enough to provide a clear photograph or video, but the consistency of multiple reports over decades lends credibility to the accounts. EMF readings have sometimes spiked in areas of frequent sightings, and investigators have noted sudden drops in temperature, particularly when the scouts are observed moving along trails or emerging from the underbrush. Witnesses often describe an emotional weight accompanying the sighting of these apparitions. While fear is natural given their sudden appearance, there is also a sense of reverence and sadness. Many perceive the scouts not as hostile spirits, but as echoes of duty, loyalty, and sacrifice. Their presence seems to be a reminder of the harsh realities faced by young men who fought in the conflict, highlighting the human cost of war in a visceral and haunting way. The fallen scouts carry with them the lingering tension of vigilance and the tragedy of lives cut short. The phenomenon appears most frequently during the early evening or at dusk, when shadows stretch across the forest floor and the fading light seems to cloak the woods in a spectral haze. Foggy conditions can enhance the apparitions, making them appear partially obscured and ethereal. Some visitors have noted that the scouts' movements are almost rhythmic, repeating patterns that could correspond to scouting maneuvers, patrol routes, or responses to imagined threats, suggesting a residual memory imprinted upon the landscape. A few reports even describe interactions with the fallen scouts, though brief and nonverbal. One visitor recounted crouching behind a tree and noticing a scout nearby, seemingly frozen in observation. When the visitor stepped forward, the figure vanished completely, leaving only the rustling leaves and the cold winter air. Others have claimed that the scouts seem aware of their presence, glancing, pausing, or adjusting their movements in response to a human observer, further heightening the unnerving realism of the encounter. Ultimately, the fallen scouts of River Raisin National Battlefield Park are more than just ghost stories. They are living echoes of history. They represent the youth, courage, and sacrifice of those who served in reconnaissance roles during the battle, replaying their movements in a loop that transcends time. The haunting is a reminder that the battlefield's past is not confined to monuments and plaques. It lingers, moving silently among the trees, patrolling paths, and threading the forest with the memory of those who never returned. Those who walk the wooded trails at night may catch sight of these spectral scouts, fleeting shadows in buckskin and frontier gear, moving with purpose and intensity. The experience is fleeting, but unforgettable, leaving an impression of both awe and unease. To witness the fallen scouts is to feel history breathe again, to stand momentarily in the presence of the young soldiers who shaped the battlefield, and to realize that some spirits never leave, forever bound to the land and their duty. Along the edge of the River Raisin National Battlefield Park, where the fog rolls in thick from the river and blankets the low-lying fields, there exists a phenomenon that has unsettled visitors for generations. The child in the fog. Many who have ventured near the battlefield's perimeter at dawn or in the early hours of a misty morning report seeing the faint outline of a small boy moving through the haze. The apparition is often described as pale and ethereal, clothed in the simple garments of a child from the early 19th century, his form wavering like smoke caught between the trees and the mist. Witnesses frequently recount the most chilling aspect of the encounter. The boy calls out for his father. His voice is small and trembling, carried softly on the wind, echoing across the frozen fields. It is not a playful or cheerful cry, but one filled with longing and sorrow, the tone of a child who has lost someone irreplaceable. Those who hear the call often feel a wave of unease and compassion simultaneously, as though drawn into a moment frozen in time, witnessing the trauma of a family torn apart by war. The apparition is not constant. It appears sporadically, almost like a flicker in the fabric of reality, often when the fog is thick and visibility is low. Visitors have described spotting the boy standing alone, sometimes by a tree line or near the riverbank, as if waiting for someone who will never return. When approached, the figure hesitates, occasionally looking over a shoulder as though searching for a familiar presence, and then dissolves into the mist without warning. The sudden disappearance often leaves observers shaken, their hearts pounding and their minds replaying the brief encounter over and over. Some historians suggest that the child in the fog may be linked to the tragic events of January 1813. When the Battle of Frenchtown raged across these fields, many soldiers were killed, and some accounts speak of families caught in the crossfire or forced to witness the horrors of war. It is possible, according to local legend, that the boy is a residual spirit, an imprint left behind by a young victim or survivor of the massacre. His repeated appearances, calling for his father, may represent the eternal longing for a parent lost amidst the chaos of battle. Encounters with the apparition are often accompanied by a sudden chill in the air. Even during warmer months, visitors report the temperature dropping inexplicably when the figure appears, a cold that seems to settle in the bones rather than just the skin. Along with the cold, some describe hearing faint, almost imperceptible sounds, the rustle of clothing, the soft patter of small feet on the ground, or the distant echo of hurried movements through the snow. These subtle sensory experiences enhance the realism of the sighting, creating an almost tangible connection to the past. A few witnesses claim that the boy sometimes points or gestures toward the battlefield's center, toward areas where the heaviest fighting took place. This has led some to speculate that the spirit may be attempting to draw attention to events long forgotten, perhaps guiding observers to places of significance or warning them of the lingering sorrow embedded in the landscape. Others believe it is a more personal haunting, a child forever searching for the father he lost, unable to rest until reunited, even if only in spirit. Paranormal investigators have attempted to document the child in the fog using photography, infrared cameras, and audio recording devices. Some have captured faint, blurred images of a small figure partially obscured by mist, while others report hearing what could be interpreted as a child's voice calling out, though it is almost always too faint to be definitively recorded. EMF meters sometimes register spikes when the apparition is reported, and thermal cameras occasionally detect a small, cold anomaly in the space the boy occupies. While these findings are inconclusive, they add an eerie weight to the consistent eyewitness accounts collected over decades. Many who witnessed the apparition describe a profound emotional impact. Beyond the initial shock or fear, there is often a sense of empathy and sorrow. Observers report feeling the boy's sadness and longing as though it is their own, a psychological echo of the trauma he endured. Some claim that, after encountering the figure, they experience dreams or thoughts about the battlefield, the families involved, or the horrors of the winter battle, as if the spirit has imprinted a fragment of its memory on their consciousness. Despite the haunting, the child in the fog is generally described as non-threatening. He does not chase, attack, or demand anything from those who see him. Instead, he is a figure of tragedy and remembrance, a ghostly reminder of the lives lost during one of the darkest chapters in River Raisin's history. His presence serves as a silent testament to the human cost of war, the innocence lost amidst chaos, and the enduring power of memory and spirit. The timing of the sightings, often at dawn or in the early morning, adds to their poignancy. In these quiet hours, when the battlefield is enveloped in mist and the world is still, the boy's figure seems most vivid. The fog itself acts as a veil between the present and the past, blurring reality and legend, allowing the spectral child to walk once more among the living. The experience leaves visitors with a mixture of awe, melancholy, and a haunting sense that history is not gone, but ever present, lingering in the air and the mist. To encounter the child in the fog is to step into a moment of history preserved by spirit. It is to hear the faint call of a boy for his lost father, to feel the cold of winter long past, and to glimpse the human cost of battle in its most innocent form. Those who walk the edges of the River Raisin National Battlefield at dawn, guided by the swirling fog, may catch sight of the small figure, hear his soft cries, and witness the fragile boundary between past and present. The apparition is fleeting, yet unforgettable, leaving a lasting impression of sorrow, memory, and the lingering presence of those who can never truly leave. On the quiet fields of the River Raisin National Battlefield Park, long after the sun has set and the last visitors have departed, a phenomenon persists that chills even the bravest of souls. The phantom cannon. Witnesses describe hearing the deep, resonant boom of artillery echoing across the open terrain, startling in its realism. The sound is not distant or muted, it reverberates through the air, shaking the ground beneath their feet, as though the battle itself has been resurrected for a fleeting moment. Those who experience it often pause, frozen, straining to locate the source, only to find the park eerily silent and still. The apparitions of sound are sometimes accompanied by an unsettling physical sensation. Visitors report feeling vibrations in the earth, a faint tremor that matches the booming, as if the cannonballs themselves are passing unseen beneath the soil. Some describe a sudden drop in temperature, an icy wind rolling over the fields with no apparent source. The combination of sound, tremor, and chill creates an atmosphere thick with tension, as though the past is bleeding into the present, demanding attention and respect. Eyewitness accounts vary in detail, but a recurring theme is the timing of the phenomenon. The phantom cannon often appears during the quietest hours, just before dawn, or late at night, when ambient noises are minimal and the imagination is most vulnerable. Some have claimed to hear multiple cannon blasts in sequence, reminiscent of a coordinated attack, while others report a single, solitary boom that echoes unnaturally across the empty fields. The unpredictability of the events only amplifies the unease, making every shadow and distant sound a potential harbinger of the spectral artillery. Many believe the phantom cannon is a residual haunting, a lingering imprint of the battle that took place on these grounds in January 1813. The River Raisin massacre was a violent and chaotic event, leaving hundreds dead and countless more wounded. The relentless firing of cannons, the screams of soldiers, and the thunder of musketry created a cacophony of war. Paranormal experts suggest that such intense emotional and physical energy can become imprinted on a location, replaying like a recording under the right conditions. The cannon fire, in this theory, is an echo of the battlefield's violent history, a reminder of the chaos and fear that once dominated the landscape. Sightings often include more than just sound. Some witnesses claim to see flashes of light in the distance, brief sparks resembling the ignition of black powder, though no cannon is present. Others report seeing faint figure soldiers in tattered uniforms moving across the fields just beyond the edge of visibility, their forms partially obscured by darkness or fog. These visual elements enhance the realism of the auditory phenomenon, creating the impression that the park itself has temporarily returned to the night of battle. The phantom cannon is not limited to a single area of the park. Reports have emerged from multiple vantage points, including the open fields where the heaviest fighting occurred, the tree lines flanking the battleground, and even near the river's edge. The widespread nature of the sightings suggests that this is not a localized haunting, but a persistent echo resonating across the entire battlefield. Visitors who experience it often speak of a surreal sensation of being immersed in history, as if they are momentarily standing in the middle of the 1813 conflict, hearing and feeling events long past. Paranormal investigators have attempted to capture the phenomenon using audio recording equipment, seismographs, and thermal imaging. While capturing definitive proof has proven difficult, some recordings have picked up faint low-frequency rumbles that align with eyewitness reports. Seismic monitors occasionally detect minor tremors in sync with reported cannon blasts, though no geological explanation accounts for them. Thermal cameras sometimes reveal cold anomalies along the fields where the cannon fire is said to occur, further lending weight to the consistency of the reports. The experience is both terrifying and humbling. Visitors frequently describe a mixture of fear and reverence when confronted by the phantom cannon. The auditory boom is startling, but it also serves as a vivid reminder of the bravery and sacrifice of the soldiers who once occupied these grounds. The spectral echoes carry with them the weight of history, the tension, fear, and courage that defined the lives of those who fought and fell. Some accounts suggest that the phantom cannon may serve as a warning or message. Witnesses report that the blasts are sometimes preceded by a sense of foreboding, a subtle change in the air, that something is about to happen. Others claim the cannon fire coincides with moments of personal reflection, as though the spirits of the battlefield are guiding observers to pause and consider the human cost of war. The phenomenon leaves a lasting impression, haunting the memories of those who hear it long after they leave the park. Despite its terrifying nature, the phantom cannon is generally non-threatening. It does not harm or pursue those who witness it, but its suddenness and intensity make it impossible to ignore. It stands as a spectral monument to the battle, a ghostly reminder that the events of January 1813 continue to resonate across time. The cannon's roar is a voice from the past, a sound that carries both history and memory, calling attention to the lives lost and the sacrifices made on the cold, snowy fields of the River Raisin. To encounter the phantom cannon is to step into a moment where history and the present converge. The booming echoes, the trembling ground, and the chilling air combine to create an experience that is as immersive as it is unsettling. It is a haunting that commands respect, a reminder that even centuries later, the battlefield's energy endures, speaking through sound and sensation to anyone willing to listen. Those who hear the phantom cannon walk away changed, carrying with them the weight of history, the echo of battle, and the knowledge that the past is never truly gone. The sound may fade as quickly as it appears, but its impact lingers, a spectral reminder that some echoes are eternal, rolling across the fields of River Raisin National Battlefield Park, long after the guns have fallen silent. On the desolate fields of River Raisin National Battlefield Park, a haunting phenomenon has been reported by countless visitors over the years. The dying prayer, as the sun dips low and shadows stretch across the battlefield. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper can be heard, carried on the cold wind. The words are faint, spoken in Old French, trembling with urgency and sorrow. Those who hear them describe the experience as chilling and surreal, a fleeting glimpse into the suffering endured by soldiers more than 2 centuries ago. The whispers are most commonly reported near the areas where the fiercest fighting occurred during the Battle of Frenchtown in January 1813. Observers often describe the voice as fragile, yet persistent, like the echo of a soul clinging to the final moments of life. The sound is not commanding or aggressive, but pleading, urgent, mournful, and desperate. Some visitors claim they can discern fragments of sentences, prayers for mercy or forgiveness, spoken by men who knew their deaths were imminent. Witnesses often report an accompanying sense of cold and unease when the whispers manifest. The air seems to thicken, carrying a frost that sinks into the bones rather than brushing the skin. A heavy, almost tangible sorrow fills the atmosphere, as if the emotions of those who perished during the battle have been absorbed into the land itself. Many describe a profound sense of empathy, feeling the fear, pain, and longing of men who faced unimaginable suffering on the frozen winter fields. The dying prayer is unpredictable. It can appear at dawn when mist clings to the low ground, in the middle of a quiet afternoon when the park seems empty, or late at night when the world is silent. Those who encounter it often report that the whispers are directional, as though emanating from specific spots where soldiers once fell. Some claim to hear a single, haunting voice, while others describe multiple whispers layered together, overlapping in a chorus of pain and desperation. Local legend suggests that the whispers are residual echoes of the French-speaking American and Canadian militia, who fought valiantly and suffered greatly during the massacre at Many were young men, far from home, confronted with overwhelming enemy forces, freezing temperatures, and little hope of survival. Some surrendered, only to be slaughtered by British Allied forces. It is said that the intensity of their suffering imprinted on the battlefield, leaving behind a spiritual residue that manifests as these whispered prayers. Paranormal investigators and historians have attempted to document the phenomenon over the years. Audio recordings sometimes capture faint murmurs that seem to rise and fall with the wind. Though distinguishing them from natural sounds is difficult, thermal imaging occasionally detects cold anomalies in areas where the whispers are strongest, suggesting that energy, whatever its origin, remains concentrated in specific parts of the battlefield. Even skeptics admit that the consistency of eyewitness reports across decades is compelling. Those who hear the dying prayer often recount a mixture of fear and reverence. The experience is rarely violent or threatening, but the intensity of the sorrow can be overwhelming. Visitors report feelings of weight pressing on their chest, tears forming unexpectedly, or a deep emotional resonance that lingers long after the sound has faded. Some interpret it as a spiritual message, a reminder of the human cost of war, the fragility of life, and the lingering presence of those who died in agony. Interestingly, the whispers sometimes appear alongside other spectral phenomena. Witnesses have reported seeing faint figures moving across the fields, torches or campfires flickering in the darkness, or the distant clatter of footsteps and musket fire. Together, these sensory experiences create a tableau in which the past seems to bleed into the present, allowing observers a brief, immersive glimpse into the events of that fateful January. The Old French language of the prayers adds an extra layer of poignancy to modern ears. The words are unfamiliar, yet the tone conveys unmistakable desperation. Some visitors attempt to translate or interpret fragments of what they hear, often finding references to God, mercy, or the anguish of leaving loved ones behind. The linguistic distance underscores the historical context, reminding listeners that these are voices from another time, speaking across centuries to be heard once more. Despite its unsettling nature, the dying prayer is generally considered non-threatening. It is a haunting of remembrance, not malevolence. Those who encounter it often report feeling a strange sense of connection to the soldiers, a bond forged through empathy and recognition of suffering. The whispers serve as a silent testament to the lives lost, their final pleas echoing eternally in the chill air above the fields where history unfolded. Some visitors claim that the dying prayer acts almost like a guide. When the whispers are strongest, they are drawn to specific areas of the park, often discovering plaques, monuments, or historical markers that commemorate the fallen. It is as if the spirits themselves are directing attention, ensuring that their sacrifices are remembered. Others report feeling compelled to remain silent, to listen respectfully, as though speaking or moving too quickly would disrupt the fragile moment of communication across time. Encountering the dying prayer leaves a lasting impression. Many describe the experience as transformative, altering their perception of the battlefield and its history. It is a reminder that the River Raisin massacre was not just a series of events on a map, but a human tragedy of extraordinary scale, etched into the land and carried forward in memory. The whispers are an audible monument, a spectral echo of suffering, loyalty, and unresolved grief. The phenomenon underscores the idea that some experiences cannot be fully explained by science or reason. The whispered prayers of dying soldiers persist in the air, a haunting blend of history, emotion, and mystery. Those who hear them find themselves momentarily transported to a time of terror, courage, and sorrow, standing in the presence of voices that should have been lost to the centuries. The Dying Prayer remains one of River Raisin National Battlefield Park's most chilling and poignant hauntings. A reminder that the past is never truly gone, and some pleas for mercy are never fully answered. Among the sprawling fields and wooded areas of River Raisin National Battlefield Park, a phenomenon has long unsettled visitors and paranormal investigators alike. The unseen hand. Those who wander the grounds after hours often report a sudden, inexplicable sensation, as if invisible fingers have closed around their clothing or arms. The experiences are disorienting and unnerving, leaving even seasoned investigators shaken and pale with the memory of the encounter. Others report being walking along a narrow trail when their shoulder is gripped with an icy pressure, as though an invisible force is trying to redirect their path. The sensation is startlingly physical. It is not a fleeting brush of air, but a firm, weighty presence, one that can make even the most confident adult stumble. Most encounters occur in locations tied to significant events of the Battle of Frenchtown, particularly along the routes where soldiers marched, camped, or fell in combat. Investigators suggest that the unseen hand may be connected to the intense emotions of those who perished during the conflict. The battlefield, scarred by violence, bloodshed, and death, seems to retain a form of residual energy, manifesting physically for those sensitive enough to feel it. The hand is not always malevolent. Many interpret it as a residual imprint of the past, a lingering force trying to communicate, guide, or warn. Visitors recount varying degrees of interaction with the unseen hand. Some describe a light tug or brush against the skin, accompanied by a chill that crawls down their spine. Others experience a more forceful grasp, as if an unseen entity is firmly holding them in place. A few even report a sensation of being pulled toward particular sites, such as a patch of snow where soldiers once fell, or near a grove of trees under which wounded men reportedly hid. The directionality and specificity of these experiences suggest a deliberate intent behind the force, rather than random atmospheric anomalies. The coldness of the contact is a consistent feature in most reports. Witnesses often speak of icy fingers gripping their arms, leaving a lingering chill even after the sensation has ended. Some compare the feeling to the shock of touching metal in winter bone-deep cold that spreads through the body. The combination of pressure and temperature creates an unmistakable sense of presence, a tangible connection to something beyond the living. Paranormal teams have investigated the unseen hand using cameras, thermal imaging, and motion sensors. While no physical form is ever captured, recordings occasionally show minor disturbances in the environment, objects trembling slightly, dust motes shifting inexplicably, and faint cold anomalies in the air. Many investigators believe these subtle signs corroborate eyewitness accounts, suggesting that a non-physical entity is capable of interacting with the world in localized, measurable ways. The psychological impact of experiencing the unseen hand is significant. Witnesses often report feelings of sudden fear, adrenaline, and confusion. Some describe an overwhelming sense of being watched, as if the touch is only one part of a broader, unseen presence. Others report a mix of terror and fascination, feeling a strange connection to the spirits, who may linger on the battlefield. Despite the initial shock, many visitors find the experience oddly humbling, a reminder that the past is not entirely absent from the land they tread. Encounters often occur during quiet hours, when ambient sounds are minimal and the mind is more sensitive to the environment. The unseen hand is rarely reported in daylight crowds, which suggests a connection between isolation and the manifestation of these experiences. Investigators note that the combination of history, desolation, and atmospheric conditions, such as cold temperatures or mist, may enhance the intensity of the phenomena. Some believe the hand may be the spirit of a soldier or citizen who died amidst the chaos of battle, unable to move on. Its actions could be attempts to communicate, guide, or even reenact unfinished duties from the past. The grasping or tugging might reflect a desire to warn the living of danger, or to draw attention to locations of historical significance. Others theorize that the hand represents the lingering fear, sorrow, or confusion of those who perished. manifesting as a physical sensation for those sensitive enough to perceive it. In some accounts, the unseen hand interacts with multiple individuals simultaneously. Groups exploring the park have reported simultaneous tugs on different members, creating a chilling sense of being encompassed by unseen forces. In these cases, the hand does not target one person alone, but seems aware of the group's collective presence. Witnesses describe an uncanny awareness, a fleeting sense that the spirits of the past are observing and responding to their intrusion on sacred ground. Though unsettling, the phenomenon is not generally harmful. The force exerts pressure but does not inflict injury, and the touch fades as suddenly as it appears. Visitors often feel a lingering tremor or tingling sensation after the experience, a reminder of the encounter that lingers long after the physical touch has ended. Many ascribe walking away with a heightened awareness of the park's history, its tragedies, and the lives of those who once walked the same fields. The unseen hand remains one of River Raisin National Battlefield Park's most mysterious and chilling hauntings. It is a reminder that history leaves more than monuments, and markers it leaves traces, echoes, and impressions that can reach across centuries. Those who experience it come away with a sense of awe, respect, and unease, recognizing that the past is never truly gone. The hand may never be fully understood or captured, yet its presence is undeniable, an invisible tether to the lives and deaths that shaped this land. To feel the unseen hand is to touch history in the most literal sense, a haunting that bridges the gap between past and present. It is a phenomenon that leaves visitors forever changed, haunted by a ghostly reminder that even when the battlefield is quiet, the souls who lived and died there are never truly gone. On the windswept fields of River Raisin National Battlefield Park, long after the sun has dipped below the horizon, an eerie sound sometimes drifts through the trees and across the open ground, the ghostly echo of campfire songs. Visitors and paranormal investigators alike have reported hearing low, mournful melodies carried on the chill night air, as if the spirits of long-dead soldiers have gathered once more to sing by fires that no longer burn. The songs are rarely heard during the day, appearing mostly under the cover of darkness when the park is silent and empty. The melodies are soft, haunting, and unmistakably human in origin. They often consist of simple, repetitive tunes, the kind soldiers might have sung to pass time on bitter winter nights. Some report that the words, faintly audible, seem to recount the fears, hopes, and memories of men facing the horrors of war. Others describe the singing as wordless, a lament that rises and falls like a cold wind brushing across the battlefield. Witnesses often report that the songs seem to come from multiple points simultaneously, drifting across the landscape as if soldiers are positioned around invisible campfires. In some accounts, the singing begins subtly, a faint hum carried on the breeze, before swelling in intensity. The sound can be disorienting. Listeners often find themselves moving toward the source, only to realize that no flames, no figures, and no instruments are present. The melodies vanish as suddenly as they appeared, leaving behind only the whisper of the wind and an unsettling sense of emptiness. Paranormal investigators have attempted to capture these ghostly ballads using audio recording equipment. Some have reported faint traces of singing on playback, low and warbled, as if the air itself carries the memory of the sound. The recordings sometimes reveal overlapping voices, suggesting multiple singers, though no one can explain how so many ethereal performers could occupy the silent night. Many investigators consider the recordings compelling evidence of residual energy echoes of soldiers' lives replaying across time. The origin of the campfire songs is tied to the park's tragic history. The Battle of Frenchtown in January 1813 was a harrowing confrontation, with many American troops facing brutal conditions and overwhelming enemy forces. Soldiers often huddled around fires for warmth, singing quietly to soothe themselves and maintain morale. The haunting melodies heard today are thought to be the spiritual remnants of those moments, carried forward by the intensity of the soldiers' fear, camaraderie, and longing for home. Visitors describe a variety of emotional reactions to the ghostly music. Some report feeling a profound sadness, a tangible sense of loss that permeates the night air. Others feel a strange comfort, as though the singing is a message of resilience and remembrance. A few recount chills and goosebumps, feeling as if unseen eyes watch them from the shadows while the melodies play. In all cases, the experience is immersive, drawing listeners into a spectral moment suspended between past and present. The songs often appear in areas of the battlefield associated with encampments or where troops would have gathered before or after combat. Some report hearing the singing near the edge of the woods, where trees provide cover similar to that which soldiers might have used. Others describe the sound emerging from open fields, as if invisible ranks of men are huddled around phantom fires. This directional quality has led some investigators to speculate that the spirits are drawn to the locations where they once lived, ate, and prepared for battle. The language and style of the ballads vary. Some of the songs resemble folk tunes of the early 19th century, while others are more somber, almost dirge-like in tone. Witnesses often describe the singing as incomplete, fragmentary lines beginning but never ending, melodies fading before reaching resolution. This fragmented quality adds to the sense of loss and unfinished business, reinforcing the impression that the spirits are trapped in a loop, unable to move on from the trauma of their final days. Interestingly, the singing sometimes appears alongside other phenomena. Witnesses have reported cold spots, unexplained lights, and fleeting shadows moving across the ground as the melodies rise and fall. Some describe the simultaneous appearance of spectral figures, ghostly soldiers who march, kneel, or crouch while the songs drift over the fields. Together, these experiences create a chilling, immersive tableau of life and death frozen in time. The experience of hearing the campfire songs leaves a lasting impression on those who witness them. Visitors often describe a heightened awareness of history, of the human cost of the battle, and of the lives lost in the brutal winter of 1813. The melodies are a reminder that the land remembers, that echoes of courage, fear, and sorrow can persist long after the last living witnesses have gone. Some claim that the songs serve as a warning, urging respect for the past and acknowledgement of the suffering that occurred on these fields. Though unsettling, the ghostly music is generally considered non-threatening. Unlike violent hauntings or aggressive spirits, the campfire songs evoke empathy rather than fear. The soldiers' voices seem to reach out for recognition, remembrance, and understanding. Listeners are left with a profound sense of connection, as if they have momentarily joined a spectral gathering, listening to the distant echoes of men long dead, sharing their stories in song. The campfire songs of River Raisin remain one of the park's most haunting and evocative phenomena. They serve as an auditory bridge to history, carrying the emotion, fear, and humanity of soldiers across 2 centuries. Those who hear them come away with an unforgettable experience, reminder that even in death, the voices of the past may rise again, drifting across the battlefield like smoke from an extinguished fire, calling the living to remember. On quiet evenings at River Raisin National Battlefield Park, when the last rays of sun fade behind the trees, visitors sometimes catch sight of a figure that seems out of place and out of time. Along the edge of the rolling fields, near the perimeter fence that marks the boundary of the park, a man often appears, standing with rigid posture and an air of authority. He leans lightly on the fence, his gaze fixed intently on the ground before him, as if he is inspecting troops or planning maneuvers. His uniform is strikingly detailed, adorned with gold-trimmed epaulets and buttons that catch the dimming light, giving him an almost spectral shimmer in the gathering dusk. Witnesses describe the officer as tall and imposing, with a stern, unreadable expression. He does not wave or speak. He simply stands, surveying the battlefield with unwavering focus. There is an unsettling sense of discipline about him, a presence that commands attention even from those who happen upon him by chance. Many who encounter him report a sudden drop in temperature around the area, a chill that seems to cling to the air near the fence. It is as though the very ground remembers the order and structure he once embodied, now manifesting in this solitary apparition. One of the most disturbing aspects of the officer is his sudden disappearance. Visitors who approach him, intending to ask a question or simply get a closer look, often find that he vanishes before their eyes. One moment he leans on the fence, the next, the spot is empty, the air still and silent. Some witnesses claim that in the brief moments before he disappears, they catch a glimpse of other faint figures in the background, soldiers in formation, musket in hand, standing as if frozen in time. These fleeting impressions make it clear that the officer is not merely a wandering ghost, but a sentinel frozen in a moment of history, forever tied to the events that unfolded on the battlefield. Accounts of the officer vary, but recurring details create a consistent image. He is most often seen during the late afternoon or early evening, when shadows stretch long across the fields and the world takes on a muted, almost sepia-toned light. The uniform is always precise, his stance always disciplined. Some visitors report feeling an almost oppressive weight in the air near him, a sense of authority that is both commanding and unnerving. Children and adults alike often hesitate before stepping closer, sensing that this is not a spirit to be approached lightly. Paranormal investigators and historians alike have tried to determine the identity of the officer. Some believe he may be a high-ranking American officer who fought during the Battle of Frenchtown, perhaps one who fell during the fighting and now lingers to watch over the field he once commanded. Others suggest he could be a British officer, equally bound by duty, surveying the landscape even in death. The truth remains uncertain, as there are no contemporary records matching a single figure to this precise description. What is undeniable, however, is the regularity of the sightings and the striking realism of the apparition. The effect on witnesses is profound. Those who have seen the officer often speak of a sudden awareness of history pressing down on them, as if the boundary between past and present has thinned. Standing in the officer's presence, they report hearing the faintest echoes of orders shouted, the distant clatter of boots on frozen ground, and the murmur of soldiers awaiting commands. Even when no one else is around, the air seems charged with anticipation, tension, and the unspoken weight of leadership carried across centuries. One particularly chilling encounter was described by a couple exploring the park near dusk. They noticed the officer standing rigidly by the fence, observing the field. The woman, curious and emboldened, stepped closer, and in that moment, the officer vanished completely. The sudden disappearance left a void in the space where he had stood, a silence so absolute that it seemed to swallow even the sounds of the evening wind. Yet, both visitors reported feeling an enduring presence, a subtle pressure at the back of their necks, as though the officer's watchful gaze lingered even after he had vanished. The officer at the fence embodies a haunting that is at once eerie and compelling. He is not violent, nor does he attempt to frighten. Rather, he serves as a reminder of the discipline, order, and weight of command experienced on the battlefield long ago. Those who encounter him leave with a sense of reverence and unease, aware that the past is never truly gone. The fence, the fields, and the lingering presence of the officer create a spectral tableau, frozen in time yet experienced by the living. Visitors to River Raisin National Battlefield Park often find themselves scanning the fences during quiet moments, wondering if they will be fortunate or unfortunate enough to witness the silent sentinel. Whether he is a guardian, a lingering soul, or a memory made manifest, the officer continues to survey his old ground, ever watchful, ever present, and forever a part of the haunting legacy of this historic site. On the quiet, open fields of River Raisin National Battlefield Park, a chilling phenomenon often awaits visitors who wander its grounds during the late afternoon or early evening. Hikers, history enthusiasts, and even park staff have reported hearing sudden, sharp pops that mimic the discharge of muskets. These sounds are startlingly realistic, echoing across the frozen or grassy terrain, and for a moment, it is easy to forget that the battle that once raged here ended over 2 centuries ago. The musket fire bursts out of nowhere, sharp and commanding, only to vanish almost immediately, leaving an eerie silence and a faint smell of gunpowder lingering in the air. Witnesses often describe the experience as both terrifying and annoying. One moment, the park is calm, the wind rustling softly through the trees, and the next, a sharp crack splits the air, accompanied by a subtle vibration beneath one's feet. Some hikers instinctively duck, expecting to see soldiers or gunmen, only to find the fields empty and still. The suddenness of the musket fire and the realism of the sound combine to create a visceral connection to the history of the site. It is as if the echoes of January 1813 have been imprinted into the land itself, replaying moments of conflict long after the last soldier fell. Paranormal investigators have been particularly interested in this phenomenon, attempting to record the musket echoes with audio equipment and sensitive microphones. On playback, recordings often reveal sharp, isolated cracks, sometimes accompanied by faint murmurs or distant shouts. Some researchers argue that these sounds are a form of residual haunting, a psychic imprint left by the trauma and intensity of the battle. The soldiers who fought here endured fear, pain, and chaos, and the energy of that night may have been embedded into the environment. Certain atmospheric conditions, cold air, mist, or the presence of living humans may trigger these echoes, allowing visitors to hear them centuries later. Eyewitness accounts vary in detail, but several consistent patterns emerge. The musket fire is most often heard in areas corresponding to intense combat, particularly near open fields where troops once faced each other. The sounds may appear as single, isolated pops or as volleys, a rhythmic pattern that suggests coordinated action rather than random noise. Many witnesses also describe a faint metallic timps in the air, reminiscent of gunpowder, even when no modern firearms are nearby. Some report hearing the distant shout of commands in English or French, carried on the wind and fading into the silence. One particularly vivid account comes from a small group of hikers exploring the northern part of the battlefield. As dusk settled, they heard the first sharp pop, followed by a series of rapid, echoing volleys that seemed to come from multiple directions. The group froze in shock, glancing nervously at the empty fields. Moments later, the sound ceased as abruptly as it had begun, leaving a profound silence and the lingering smell of gunpowder. One hiker later described seeing faint silhouettes moving across the distance, the outlines of soldiers frozen in mid-step before fading away like mist. The phenomenon is not limited to auditory experiences. Many visitors report subtle visual or sensory effects accompanying the musket echoes. Cold spots appear without warning, the air heavy with tension. Some feel an oppressive weight, as if unseen eyes are watching, while others describe a tingling sensation on their skin, a reminder of the lives lost here long ago. These combined effects create a haunting, immersive experience, where the battlefield feels alive with the presence of its past inhabitants. Historians note that the areas where the musket fire is most frequently reported correspond to locations of particularly brutal fighting. The American troops, outnumbered and facing harsh winter conditions, engaged in desperate skirmishes with British and Allied forces. Many soldiers were killed or wounded, and the battle's intensity may have left a lasting mark on the landscape. It is this imprint, some believe, that allows modern visitors to experience echoes of the past, as if the land itself remembers the fear and chaos of that night. The echoing muskets can affect individuals differently. Some hear only a single pop and are startled but unharmed, while others experience volleys, commands, and even faint shouts, as if they have been transported back in time. Sensitivity to the phenomenon may vary, allowing certain visitors to tune in to the residual energy more fully. In this sense, the musket fire is both personal and collective, a bridge connecting living witnesses to the soldiers who once occupied the ground. For those who experience it, the phenomenon leaves a lasting impression. The sharp, commanding reports of musket fire, the smell of gunpowder, and the fleeting sense of movement across the fields make the battlefield feel alive once more. Visitors often leave with a renewed respect for the soldiers who fought and died here, and a profound awareness of history's lingering presence. The echoing muskets are a haunting reminder that while battles may end, the echoes of fear, bravery, and sacrifice can persist, carried across centuries in the wind and across the ground. The musket fire is not merely a sound. It is a living testament to the past. A spectral chorus that reminds all who hear it of the courage and tragedy embedded in River Raisin National Battlefield Park. Those who witness it cannot help but feel a connection to the history, a vivid, chilling encounter with a world that exists just beneath the surface of the present. At River Raisin National Battlefield Park, a phenomenon known among locals as the Shadow Battalion has long haunted the grounds. Visitors and nighttime explorers report seeing a line of figures moving with a precision that seems impossible for mere shadows. They appear at dusk or under the cover of a foggy morning, emerging along the tree line or across the open fields where the soldiers once fought. These figures are tall and thin, their forms indistinct, yet their movement is deliberate, measured, and filled with a silent authority. Witnesses often describe an immediate sense of awe and unease upon seeing them. The figures march in perfect alignment, mimicking the drills of a disciplined military unit. Their steps are synchronized, echoing faintly against the ground as though the soil itself remembers the weight of countless boots that once trod it. Observers note that the shadows do not speak or react to the living, yet the air seems charged with their presence, a mixture of tension, purpose, and latent anger. Some have reported a subtle vibration in the earth beneath them, almost as if the spirits of these soldiers carry the battlefield's residual energy wherever they go. The appearance of the Shadow Battalion is unpredictable. Some visitors claim to have seen them only once, while others report multiple sightings over several nights. The figures are never fully solid, often blurring at the edges or flickering like images projected on a disturbed surface. When approached, they dissolve or fade into the mist, leaving no trace beyond the lingering echo of disciplined footsteps. Occasionally, the fog thickens around them, obscuring the forest or field, giving the impression that the battalion moves not only in space but between dimensions, existing partially outside the world of the living. Paranormal researchers and historians suggest that the Shadow Battalion may be a residual haunting, a replay of the soldiers' final movements captured in the energy of the land. The precise formations, the unwavering discipline, and the intense focus of the figures indicate a memory frozen in time, echoing through the centuries. Some theorists believe that the battalion is not just repeating ordinary drills, but is reliving the moments before battle, perhaps as a reflection of orders given by officers who died in the chaos. Their unwavering presence suggests a lingering attachment to duty, a refusal to leave the battlefield even after death. Sensory experiences accompanying the sightings heighten their eerie nature. Observers often report a chill in the air, far colder than the ambient temperature. Some feel a weight pressing down on their shoulders or a subtle tug at their clothing, as if the spirits sense intrusions into their domain. Faint sounds accompany the sighting, a low murmur of commands, the shuffle of feet, or the occasional metallic clink that could be imagined musket or equipment sounds. These auditory echoes vanish as quickly as they appear, leaving only silence and a profound sense of being watched. The battalion's presence is both mesmerizing and terrifying. Witnesses describe a mix of awe and dread, drawn in by the order and discipline, yet unsettled by the knowledge that these figures are not alive. Some hikers report stopping mid-step, unable to continue, captivated by the phantom drill, as if they were observing history itself materialize. Others flee the scene, overwhelmed by the oppressive weight of the ghost's presence, feeling that the spirits are aware of intruders and do not welcome them. Local legends add further layers to the mystery. Some say that the Shadow Battalion represents soldiers who never survived the battle, doomed to rehearse their final march for eternity. Others believe they are protecting the land, ensuring that no living person disturbs the graves in memory of those who fell. The accounts of multiple witnesses describing similar formations suggest that this is more than imagination, a shared phenomenon that seems to appear consistently under certain conditions, particularly in low light or fog. Even modern technology struggles to capture the Shadow Battalion. Cameras often fail to record anything, leaving only vague distortions or brief flickers that cannot explain the detailed movement reported by eyewitnesses. Audio equipment occasionally picks up faint marching sounds or whispers, but these are inconsistent and vanish upon playback, reinforcing the sense that the battalion exists partially outside our normal reality. The most unsettling aspect of the sightings is the battalion's discipline. Unlike other ghostly apparitions that move chaotically or vanish immediately, these figures operate with purpose. Their alignment, timing, and movement suggest that the essence of their military training survives beyond death. Observers note that even as the forms blur or fade, the sense of command remains, lingering in the air like a silent order unfulfilled. The Shadow Battalion at River Raisin is a haunting reminder of the battle's human cost. These ghostly soldiers do not seek vengeance or recognition, they simply exist, endlessly performing the drills and movements ingrained into them during life. To witness them is to glimpse the lingering spirit of history, frozen in time, yet palpably present. Visitors leave the field changed, carrying with them the memory of a disciplined, spectral army, forever marching across the battlefield, their orders echoing silently in the night. Even amidst the quiet hum of the River Raisin National Battlefield Park's Visitor Center, a strange and unsettling energy lingers, one that has left staff and visitors alike unnerved for decades. Though the building is modern and constructed long after the bloody events of January 1813, it seems that the echoes of the past refuse to remain buried. Reports of paranormal activity have become so common that employees speak of the visitor center with the same caution as they would the open fields of the battlefield itself. It begins with small, inexplicable occurrences. Staff members frequently describe the sensation of objects moving without explanation. Books on shelves may slide a few inches to the side. Pamphlets that were neatly stacked find themselves scattered across counters, and personal items left on desks mysteriously disappear, only to reappear in completely different rooms. These events often happen when no one else is around, leaving employees to question whether the building itself is alive with unseen presences. Some have grown so accustomed to these anomalies that they check their surroundings instinctively before dismissing a strange noise as the wind or a creaking floorboard. Doors slamming shut is another common report. Heavy metal or wooden doors, which should remain motionless in the absence of wind or human intervention, suddenly swing closed with force, startling unsuspecting staff. In some cases, multiple doors across different sections of the building have slammed almost simultaneously, accompanied by a sudden chill that washes over the room. Employees describe a sensation akin to walking through a cold draft that seems to linger in one spot far longer than any natural airflow could explain. It is as if invisible hands sweep through the halls, asserting presence and authority, reminding anyone who enters that the spirits of the past still occupy this space. One of the most disturbing aspects of the hauntings involves unexplained cold spots. Staff and visitors alike have reported entering certain areas of the visitor center only to feel a sudden drop in temperature, often accompanied by goosebumps or shivers. These cold zones are isolated and localized, sometimes appearing in corners or hallways with no apparent source. The phenomenon is so pronounced that employees have tested HVAC systems repeatedly, only to find everything operating normally. Some speculate that these icy pockets are tied to residual energy from the countless souls who perished during the battle, a concentrated memory of trauma and loss that manifests as a tangible chill. Strange sounds are also a frequent occurrence. Footsteps echo through empty corridors, the rhythm sometimes rapid and panicked, other times slow and deliberate, resembling the march of a disciplined soldier. Whispered voices, low and unintelligible, seem to float just beyond the range of comprehension. Occasionally, sharp noises, like the click of a hinge or the rattle of a chair, punctuate the silence, producing a sudden jolt of fear in those nearby. Some staff members claim they have even heard the faint cries of soldiers calling for help, faint enough to be dismissed as imagination, yet persistent enough to haunt the edges of awareness. One particularly unsettling account came from a night security guard. While performing a routine check of the visitor center, he reported feeling the unmistakable sensation of being watched. The lights flickered briefly, and he heard a soft scuffling noise behind him. Turning, He saw nothing, but the sensation of presence remained. As he continued his rounds, doors slammed shut around him, and a series of heavy thumps echoed from the upper levels of the building, as if someone or something was pacing overhead. By the time he finished his inspection, the guard described feeling a mixture of fear and awe. A chilling awareness that the spirits of the battlefield had found their way into even the modern corners of the park. Occasionally, visitors to the center experienced these hauntings firsthand. Museum goers have recounted seeing objects shift in glass displays or hearing faint whispers as they examine exhibits. Some claim to have felt cold fingers brush against their arms, only to find no one nearby. Cameras and smartphones occasionally capture strange orbs of light, fleeting shadows, or distortions that cannot be explained by reflection or lens flare. While skeptics argue that these phenomena are nothing more than natural drafts or tricks of perception, the consistency of reports over the years suggests something more elusive at work. The visitor center's hauntings have prompted both curiosity and reverence. Staff often treat the building with a careful respect, avoiding unnecessary noise and movement near areas with high activity. Some have left protective charms or tokens in certain rooms, not necessarily out of belief in superstition, but as a form of acknowledgement. A quiet recognition that this space holds memories that reach beyond the living. Researchers and paranormal investigators frequently visit, hoping to document the phenomena using audio and video equipment. Yet the hauntings often defy conventional recording methods, appearing selectively to those present rather than consistently to all. Historians suggest that the restless spirits in the visitor center are tied to the broader trauma of the River Raisin battlefield. Thousands of soldiers fell here, many wounded and left to die in the frigid January cold. The suddenness and violence of their deaths may have left lingering impressions on the environment, manifesting centuries later in the forms witnessed today. Others speculate that the building itself, constructed over parts of the historical site, has absorbed some of these energies, creating a conduit through which the past continues to bleed into the present. Whether one interprets these events as ghostly phenomena or unexplained environmental anomalies, the visitor center remains a place where the weight of history is keenly felt. Staff members and visitors alike leave with stories of sudden chills, shifting objects, and the undeniable impression of unseen watchers. The restless spirits of River Raisin National Battlefield Park seem determined to assert their presence, reminding all who enter that the echoes of that fateful January day have never truly faded. In the quiet moments after the doors close and the lights dim, the visitor center becomes a silent, spectral bridge between past and present. Objects settle in their proper places, shadows lengthen, and the chill lingers just long enough to remind anyone present that the battlefield's history is not confined to the open fields outside. Inside the walls of the modern building, the restless spirits continue to make their presence known, a haunting testament to the human cost of conflict and the enduring power of memory. Near the outskirts of River Raisin National Battlefield Park, there is a section of the fields that many visitors instinctively avoid. Here lies what is believed to be one of the hastily prepared mass graves from the Battle of January 1813. Soldiers, many wounded and left to die in the frigid winter cold, were buried quickly, their bodies laid side by side in shallow trenches. Though centuries have passed, those who venture near this somber area often report an oppressive atmosphere, as if the weight of sorrow and tragedy has become ingrained in the very soil. Paranormal investigators and visitors alike have described a palpable heaviness that hangs in the air. Breathing seems more laborious, and a feeling of unease settles over the body and mind. Even on warm summer days, the spot feels unnaturally cold and heavy. Some hikers report a tightness in their chests, a sensation akin to standing beneath an invisible burden. This energy is not merely emotional. It is almost tangible, pressing down like an unseen hand that refuses to release its grip. Investigators have recorded unusual electromagnetic fluctuations near the suspected grave sites. Devices spike without any electrical source, and cameras occasionally capture fleeting shadows or orbs of light hovering just above the ground. Audio equipment sometimes picks up low murmurs, unintelligible yet unmistakably human. As if a crowd of voices from the past is struggling to make itself heard. The sounds are never loud, barely perceptible, but they are enough to unsettle even the most seasoned researchers. Some describe the whispers as plaintive, echoing cries for help, or lamentations of those who never received proper burials. Visitors often describe a sensation of being watched, though no one else is present. Hikers walking alone have reported glancing over their shoulders repeatedly, convinced that shadowy figures linger at the edge of the trees or just beyond the horizon of the frozen fields. Occasionally, fleeting images appear in the corner of the Aja soldier kneeling, a figure hunched over indesparingly, to vanish when observed directly. Many believe these visions are residual energy from the violent deaths and hurried burials, imprinted onto the land by trauma and anguish. The oppressive energy does not discriminate between those with knowledge of the battlefield and casual passers-by. Children have complained of a sudden chill or an unsettling feeling in their stomachs, while adults sometimes feel an overwhelming sadness that seems to have no source. One visitor recalled walking near the gravesite and feeling an unexplainable urge to kneel, to offer some form of respect or prayer, as though the spirits themselves demanded acknowledgement. Another described the air thickening, almost tangible, as if each breath carried the weight of hundreds of lost lives. Paranormal teams report the area as one of the most active in the park. Instruments detect erratic readings on temperature, electromagnetic fields, and even subtle changes in atmospheric pressure. Researchers have attempted to communicate with these presences using standard EVP methods, often capturing whispers and faint calls that sound like names or pleas. Some recordings suggest movement of unseen figures, the shuffling of feet across frozen or hardened earth, and the faint groans of soldiers still trapped in their final moments. Each experiment leaves investigators both fascinated and unnerved, providing glimpses into a past that refuses to remain silent. The mass grave's energy also seems to influence the emotional state of those nearby. Visitors have reported sudden bouts of sadness or anxiety, sometimes tears appearing without conscious cause. Even those familiar with the history find themselves overwhelmed by an inexplicable sense of grief. It is as if the souls of the fallen soldiers, denied proper rites and buried in haste, have left a permanent imprint on the landscape. The energy is not angry or malicious, but intensely sorrowful, a collective lamentation frozen in time. Local legends add to the eerie atmosphere. Some believe that if one stands still and listens carefully, the faint groans of the wounded and dying can be heard carried on the wind. Others claim that objects left near the gravesites, such as flowers or personal belongings, are moved or disturbed overnight, as if touched by unseen hands. The stories of sudden chills, fleeting shadows, and inexplicable pressure all reinforce the notion that the spirits of the fallen remain tethered to the earth, their unrest manifesting through both physical sensations and supernatural phenomena. Even modern visitors are affected. Photographers and hikers often remark on the difficulty of capturing clear images near the mass grave, with lenses fogging or flashes failing. Nighttime excursions are said to be even more intense, with the combination of darkness and historical trauma amplifying the sense of unease. Some choose to leave immediately upon feeling the first pang of dread, while others stay, compelled by curiosity or a desire to honor the lost soldiers. Many leave the area changed, carrying a silent, almost ineffable connection to the battlefield and its tragic history. In the quiet moments, when wind rustles through the trees and snow melts into the fields, the mass grave seems almost alive with memory. The energy of countless lost lives presses outward, reminding visitors that history is never truly gone. The air is heavy with grief, yet it is also a testament to the enduring power of remembrance. Those who stand in the presence of the grave are confronted not only by the reality of past horrors, but by the persistence of their echoes in the present. Whether interpreted as spiritual unrest, residual energy, or a deeply emotional connection to history, the mass grave at River Raisin remains a site of profound mystery. It is a place where sorrow lingers, where the cries of the past seem almost audible, and where visitors cannot help but feel the weight of history pressing upon them. The land itself becomes a silent witness, preserving the memory of the fallen soldiers in ways that defy explanation, ensuring that the horrors and sacrifices of the past are never truly forgotten. On certain evenings at River Raisin National Battlefield Park, a chilling phenomenon has been reported by both visitors and local historians. In the dim light of dusk, when the air grows still and the wind carries a strange whispering, the battlefield seems to come alive not with the living, but with echoes of the past. Witnesses claim to see the Battle of January 1813 replayed before their eyes, as though time itself has folded over the field to reveal a spectral performance of violence, chaos, and tragedy. Observers often describe the figures as hazy, translucent shapes, flickering like shadows in a candlelit room. Soldiers appear in formations long forgotten, their blue and gray uniforms blending with the mist that seems to rise from the frozen ground. The clashes of muskets, the glint of bayonets, and the shouts of officers carry through the air with startling realism. Though no one alive stands in sight, some report the scent of gunpowder and smoke, the coppery temps of blood, and the crunch of snow underfoot. Sensory details so vivid that the illusion feels tangible, almost physical. The field seems to shift in response to the spectral soldiers' movements. Trees and shrubs appear to bow under the weight of unseen activity, while the frozen river or muddy ground seems to ripple with the pressure of countless boots. Observers often report a rising sense of panic or dread as the battle intensifies, as though the fear and chaos of the past have seeped into the present. Even the bravest witnesses feel a shiver creep along their spine, as if the very land is alive with the suffering it has witnessed. The phenomenon is unpredictable. Some who visit the park in daylight see nothing more than open fields and quiet trees. Others, particularly at twilight or in the early hours before dawn, report the full spectral reenactment. Those who experience it often describe a moment of eerie calm before the battle begins. A thick fog descends, the air grows heavy, and distant shouts start to echo. Suddenly, figures emerge from the mist, marching, shouting, and fighting. Horses charge across the battlefield, and shadowy soldiers fall as though struck by invisible force. Weapons glint with an ethereal sheen, and even the expressions of the soldiers, determined, terrified, or pained, can be discerned, despite their ghostly forms. The auditory aspect of the phenomenon is as unnerving as the visual. Witnesses report the sharp cracks of musket fire, the thud of falling bodies, and the anguished cries of wounded men. Commands are shouted in both English and French, orders echoing across the snow-covered fields or muddy expanses. Some have claimed to hear the clinking of chains, the groans of the injured, and even the faint calls of officers rallying their troops. Paranormal investigators have tried to record these sounds, often capturing faint whispers or low rumbles that vanish when replayed. Others hear nothing at all, leading some researchers to suggest that the battle exists only partially in our dimension, visible and audible only to those sensitive to the residual trauma of history. The battle's replay is not merely a visual spectacle. Some visitors report feeling physical sensations, sudden chills as icy air sweeps across the field, a heaviness pressing on the chest, or the hair-raising feeling of being observed by thousands of unseen eyes. Many leave the area shaken, unable to shake the oppressive feeling that the dead are present, that the field itself remembers. Some describe the sensation of being caught between two worlds, standing in the present, yet intruding upon a tragedy that occurred over 2 centuries ago. Researchers speculate that the phenomenon may be a form of residual haunting, a replay of energy imprinted upon the land by the intense fear, pain, and chaos of the battle. Others suggest it is a portal through time, a thin veil between the living and the dead that occasionally reveals what transpired in the past. Eyewitnesses often report that the figures show no awareness of their observers. They fight and fall as they did in life, oblivious to those who watch. This lends a sense of authenticity that is both mesmerizing and horrifying. Despite the terror it inspires, the spectral battle also holds a strange fascination for those who witness it. Some feel compelled to remain and watch, unable to turn away from the reenactment. as though bearing witness is a way to honor the fallen. Many describe a mixture of fear, sorrow, and awe, feeling a deep connection to the history of the site and the men who fought and died there. Others, however, cannot endure the emotional weight and flee the field, haunted by images and sounds that linger long after they leave. Local legends amplify the eeriness of the phenomenon. Some say that the spirits of officers still roam the battlefield, seeking to correct mistakes or rally their men, doomed to repeat the battle for eternity. Others claim that those who witness the full reenactment are marked, carrying the memory of the conflict in their dreams or waking thoughts. Paranormal teams report that multiple visitors have described seeing the same figures, moving in the same formations, despite arriving independently and at different times. This consistency suggests a pattern, a residual energy replaying the pivotal events of that January winter. Perhaps the most unnerving aspect is a sudden return to silence. As abruptly as the spectral battle begins, it ends. Figures fade into the mist, gunfire ceases, and the battlefield returns to its quiet, undisturbed state. Observers are left in the eerie stillness, the echoes of musket fire lingering only in memory. The land appears normal once more, yet a lingering sense of dread or sorrow remains, a reminder that history never fully dies. The battle replayed at River Raisin National Battlefield Park serves as a stark reminder of the violence and tragedy that unfolded over 2 centuries ago. Those who experience it encounter more than mere ghostly figures. They face the raw emotion, chaos, and fear of a moment in time long past. The spectral reenactment is a haunting testament to the human cost of war, frozen in the land and occasionally made visible to the living. It is a place where history refuses to remain silent, and where visitors glimpse the terrible, unyielding truth of the battlefield, long after the soldiers have fallen. And so, the echoes of River Raisin continue to haunt the living. This battlefield, once the stage of unspeakable tragedy, remains alive with the spirits of those who cannot find peace. The cries, the shadows, the phantoms, they remind us that history never truly dies. When you walk these grounds, remember the cost of war, the lives cut short, and the restless souls still wandering. Perhaps they seek justice, perhaps they seek remembrance, or perhaps they simply cannot leave the place where their blood was spilled. Until our next descent into the haunted past, may you walk in light, but never forget the shadows that follow close behind.